on the minute and the second of 7 o'clock. Good evening, everybody. Let me just wait for these standard Fs in the chat to make sure that the audio is working. Late? That is not true, Cabin Fever. I might have been 1 second late. Okay, this is something of a, how do I say this? The first video that went sort of viral on the channel that really directed me in the direction of the vlog, VLAWG, was my breakdown of Alex Jones's deposition. It was also my introduction to the YouTube chicanery. I never thought I would be involved in the discussion, the public discourse on social media censorship, rules that apply to some but not to others. I never foresaw myself ever being there. And circumstance is a weird thing where it's beyond your control and it draws you in just by virtue of you doing what you're doing. And so tonight, we're going to have Alex Jones on, and we're going to have a discussion that I've been having in my head for a while, because I'm not hiding anything when I say that Alex Jones is both famous and infamous. And I had some hesitations, I was nervous, reluctant, excited to do this for a number of reasons. First and foremost, I'm obviously nervous that this could have an impact on my channel. I've been building this channel for years. That's a selfish fear, but not a legitimate concern, so to speak. The concern I had with someone like Alex Jones, with the notoriety, the famousness and infamousness, or I guess notoriety is the right word, is that to some extent, I get the impression that a lot of people in the media, from Megyn Kelly to Vice News, view Alex Jones as a commodity to be exploited for their own personal gain, their own political gain, their own media gain. I say this well aware of hashtag confession through projection, and I don't want people thinking that of me. But having followed Alex Jones since 2016, especially since my video, I've had legitimate questions I wanted to ask. We now have lived through an era where social media, the oligarchy, or whatever, the powers that be, have successfully deplatformed an individual who you might find objectionable. And it's not that I totally don't just totally understand that. I totally understand that. People can find Alex Jones totally objectionable in his message, in his demeanor, in his style. But the world in which we are living now is one in which if someone doesn't like your style or your content or your message, even if they have legitimate reasons for that, they can deperson you, they can deplatform you, they can erase you from the public discourse, all the while continuing to say whatever they want about you in your absence. In French, there's an expression, les absents ont toujours tort. Those who are not there are always wrong. And I didn't appreciate it at the time, although Robert Barnes had been saying it. Alex Jones was a test run to see what the social media giants could get away with. Love him or hate him, that's what it was. They saw what happened, and now we're in the world in which the social media giants, using nebulous, pretextual arguments, can deplatform the sitting president of the United States of America. Not exaggerating, the most powerful person on the face of the earth. The social media giants, under the pretext that a speech calling for peaceful protest can be insightful to the point where that person, the president, can be deplatformed because it worked so well prior. Nobody objected because, I wouldn't say nobody objected, but a lot of people did not object because, hey, Alex Jones was an easy target. And we're in a world now where there's no limit to it. And the only time the proponents of this censorship complain are when they're in the crosshairs. So with all that said, I'm excited to do this. It's going to be a different type of discussion. I guess I'm fortunate in the sense that for legal reasons, we're not going to discuss pending litigation, and that's the thorniest one. But nothing new can be said on that front anyhow. You can go watch Megyn Kelly's interview if you want to see. If you want to see journalism that is so highly edited, it's impossible to know what was going on in the first place. And we're not going to talk any medical advice just because that's not my wheelhouse and that's not the thing I do either. I'm not joking when I say this. You all know the live streams. We're going to talk about Alex Jones, and we're going to get to know Alex Jones as an individual, which might upset people because people are now living in the realm of a world where you have to demonize people you dislike. We're literally, freedom is freedom. What was it? Slavery is freedom, ignorance is strength, and intolerance is tolerance. That's the world in which we're living. So the chat, I suspect, is going to be lively. Standard disclaimers. YouTube takes 30% to super chat. I'm going to do my best, but I might focus more on this conversation tonight, not bring up as much of the chat. I'm going to thank you all in advance for the support, for the comments. Keep it civil. The only thing that really gets spammed, overt threats, and spam. The only thing that gets blocked, overt threats and spam. So just be respectful in as much as it's going to be heated, I know, in the chat. Without further ado, we're going to bring in this order, because I don't want to screw up the order that I got. Alex Jones, then Robert Barnes, and then I'm going to ask some questions of childhood after we say hello. Alex?
Hey, it's good to be here. Big fan of the show. In fact, I'd seen your program before. You covered some of the litigation going on that went so viral. So, I mean, I think it's a little too much to say you got famous at first just covering what was happening with me. You already had a popular channel. I think you bring up some really good points. I think people see the fact that you're fair and that you're for free speech. So it's really great to be here with you. And, you know, the comments you made are dead on. There's been a process where I didn't realize 10 years ago, 8 years ago, even 6, 7 years ago, how big I'd already gotten. And so I would just cover what other people were saying and, you know, give credence to a lot of things and wasn't clear about what I really supported and not. And it did cause some people problems and pain. The difference is once the media picked up on that, they kind of typecast you and focus on maybe 1/10 of 1% of what you've done in your life and make that about you, and then misrepresent what you've said and what you've done as a pretext to try to keep you out of any venue.
100%.
And so look, Charlie Manson got interviewed probably 300 times in prison for orchestrating and being convicted of murder of Sharon Tate and others. I've never murdered anybody, and I didn't lie about WMDs in Iraq, and I've never consciously lied. I never consciously tried to hurt people. I have made mistakes. I am self-trained,
but hold on,
and I've learned a lot. I've been on air 27 years now, but I'm just glad to be here and be able to respond live on air.
And we're going to get into this because this is, first I'm going to bring in Robert because he's got to say hi. Robert, how you doing?
Good. How are you, Alexander?
I'm good. Good to see you guys. I love your show.
Yeah, we are gonna get there because I do have the questions. I do have. I'll have some grandstanding in terms of being typecast and, like Steve Martin said, at some point we become caricatures of ourselves. We're gonna get into that. But before we even get into there, I was searching around all day on the internet. I've seen tons of interviews, tons of hit pieces, tons of parodies and memes. And I used to watch Howard Stern, so I would hear your alter ego on Howard Stern all the time. But I didn't get anything about you as a human, as an individual growing up. I know your parents, your father was a dentist, your mother was a homemaker, but nothing of your childhood. How many siblings did you have? Where were you brought up? How long has your family been in America for? What generation American are you? Back to basics, and then we're going to get to the meaty stuff.
Well, sure. I mean, I grew up in a suburb of Dallas until I was a sophomore in high school. Then we moved here, went to Anderson High School. And my family, I both sides go back to the Mayflower. And you know, after that, the founding of Texas, and a lot of other stuff. So you could say, I guess, as colonizers, you know, I'm part of the first colonizing groups to North America from England and Scotland and Ireland. And I'm just a pro-Americana guy that loves everybody. And I saw an anti-American globalist movement taking place when I was in high school. So I decided to try to get on air, got on Access TV in 1995, got on local radio by 1996, and got syndicated by 1998. And so I was already gotten pretty big and pretty syndicated by the time I was 30-something years old. And then I challenged 9/11, you know, the fact there was a lot of evidence of prior knowledge and then lies about WMDs. And then I, of course, then just expanded out from there. And so that's basically where I come from and what I stand for. And I've never been trained by the CFR or trained by ABC News or NBC News. I don't have a college degree. I just am a commentator that gives my opinion and my analysis of things that has guests on air. And I don't pre-screen my guests. I don't, you know, sit there and you know, talk to them for 2 days before they come on, like CNN or Fox News would do with a lot of their guests. We just have people on, they give their opinion on things and just, I mean, I really believe in free speech.
And I think, you know, my sense is that for a lot of people that have a willingness to challenge the institutional narrative, a willingness to see the world through a different prism than the one the institutional press or the official textbooks want to have, is that they have a unique family history. And like in your case, like your ancestry goes back, actually, we share some ancestors. Goes back to Norman, England, if you go back to one side of the line. But you go into Western Pennsylvania, then to Tennessee, places like the hill country of Northern Mississippi, then to East Texas. And this is an old populist line of thought of people that goes back literally centuries that you sort of you sort of grew up amongst. But the other thing you talked about is that one of the big influences, I think, for people that are learn to challenge and question the institutional narrative rather than just bow to it and repeat it, as our docile institutional press does, is the stories that you hear growing up as a kid, the stories you hear from family members, the stories can you talk about how some of that influenced your understanding of the world and your willingness not to accept the institutional narrative?
Well, sure. My mom's brother, who died like 6 years ago of pneumonia, he's a great guy. He had been a big helicopter ace in Vietnam and been in secret operations, and then he got recruited into Iran-Contra. And then he got out of it. And I remember growing up, he'd come to visit and he would just say, everything's fake. It's all a lie. The government's doing horrible, evil things. It's not our government. It's a breakaway group. And my dad had been involved in kind of some of the scientific establishment stuff. And he basically had the same view. And I mean, like you said, kind of that thing that goes back to Magna Carta, where we get common law, where we get basically 1776 from as an extension of 1215 and Runnymede. And the Scots and the Irish and the Brits all fighting with each other, the Norman invasion before that, and so those fights of basic freedoms that were first demanded by the lords, and then by the local commoners, and then by the average people, and then by women, and then by non-whites. And so it's not like America was founded trying to be mean and not extend those rights. There was debate about that during the Declaration of Independence or in the Constitution, and it should have been settled in. It wasn't, but it was definitely a sin. But it is the West, and it is those ideas that basically worldwide created the original ideas of true every person is created equal and endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. And so absolutely, I grew up around a bunch of people that had been in the government and been in the army and been in the military and been inside all these things. And so I grew up, hearing all this stuff and learning all these things and just thinking everybody knew this stuff. And so I guess I did kind of grow up in that soup where they weren't telling me, go out and do this. I was growing up around this and seeing this. And so I guess I was primed and ready right out of high school to start doing that.
And that's the second thing you mentioned, because one aspect of of your life history that's completely not talked about very much is you're an exceptionally well-read individual, and you started out reading from a very young age. And some of the books that you've referenced are fascinating books that I recommend to people. Can you talk about, one, why were you interested and curious about books at a young age, and to know the kind of things you could just talk about right there?
Well, I mean, reading condensed history, and obviously it's not all 100% true because history is a mix of different perspectives and ideas, but reading really, thick historical books where every page is a battle, every page is a piece of legislation. I mean, I read all the classics like Rise and Fall of the Third Reich that won a Pulitzer Prize. Then I read like Order of the Death's Head, just, a 700 book page, a book just about the SS. And I read about World War I and I read about the Napoleonic Wars, and I got really addicted to reading that because I was, good at reading by the time I was about 7. By the time I was about 8 or 9, I was reading almost at a college level. And so my parents would not buy me a bunch of stuff. They'd let me go to the library. So I go to the library once a week, and I'd get like all the Robert E. Howard Conan books that was written by a Texan. And I read those in about a month, all 7 or 8 of them. And so then I discovered at about 8 or 9, history books are actually more entertaining and there's more action in those. And so whereas other kids, when I was 9 years old, were playing Dungeons and Dragons, and I would play Dungeons and Dragons with some of the neighborhood kids too. But whereas they were doing that every day, I was, once I got home after football practice, if I wasn't, out playing baseball or whatever, I was just reading all these history books because they were way more, and I learned about the characters and how they were connected. So to me, it was like fiction. But it was reality. And so that kind of helped me get a major scaffolding or skeleton to then by the time I was out of high school and went to local college for a few years, and I was already light years ahead of what they were talking about, and was really cynical that I saw that it really wasn't education. It was more indoctrination, and it was very, very dumbed down. So I saw that very, very quickly.
Now, you had a favorite book, I think, that you fell in love with when you were in your teens about conspiracy theories, what were called conspiracy theories at the time. Do you remember the name of that book?
Sure. It was None Dare Call a Conspiracy by Gary Allen, whose son went on to found Politico. And by falling in love with it, it was a short 200-page book or so, but I'd already read most of that. I already knew a lot of it. And so it was just so quick and accurate how the super rich fund fascism and communism, how the ultra rich have gotten together and they had, Anthony Sutton documents and stuff that had just come out in the church committee hearings in the 70s, where it was all the proof. I mean, it wasn't like the opinion. about this corporate world government plan, and they want this to take control of the planet and depopulate people. And so it was very intriguing because it's not like where you're reading comic books and there's Captain America and Red Skull, but it's fiction, but based on archetypes. This is like real. So I'm reading, okay, David Rockefeller said in the New York Times that we want Mao Zedong and communism. I'm not going to believe that. I'm going to go to the library. So by the time I was about 18 or 19, I would go to the UT Law Library and they'd give me help and help me find in the microfilm the actual New York Times article. And I'd be sitting there with the librarian going, yeah, we never read this. This is incredible. So it was something, it was about reading a history book. And then before the internet was, ubiquitous like it is now, before you could find stuff, and then going and seeing it for yourself. And so it would be a huge deal. And then as soon as I got on Access TV in 1995, and I would like hold up these New York Times articles, here's David Rockefeller calling for communism and saying Mao Zedong is good. And so I was just repeating what the establishment would call, right-wing John Birch talking points, but they weren't right-wing John Birch talking points. These were real things and real world government being set up. And I was like in on it, and I knew about it, and I was going to have to warn people because I thought as soon as we warn people about this horrible stuff, they're going to be able to stop it. And so that's basically the genesis of what I did. But then they would say, okay, you're on local radio. We don't believe you. So I said, okay, I'll make films and show these news articles. I'll make films and, interview people, and I'll make films and show people. And so that's how I was immediately successful, putting out these really, primitive films that were really almost like books on tape, books on video, where I would say, okay, here's this article, here's where they said it, and here's this clip where this guy said it. And so I found out early on, it wasn't right wing or left wing, like the media always says, like asking questions about government, is cryptically racist or some secret group. It was liberals, it was conservatives, it was black people, old people, white people. And I immediately got underground popular with all these rappers, and leftist groups were like probably more prominent in conspiracy theory than anybody because of JFK. And I was suddenly going to New York and going to San Francisco and, meeting with people that had huge archives of just everything. And it was wild. It was like finding out about a whole alternate universe, like the left would say, but it was an alternate universe that was just old news and old clippings and what was being debated 20, 30, 40 years before, which now you turn on the news, you never even hear about. So it wasn't even so much that we knew that this old news was gospel. It was the excitement of kind of re-engineering or reverse engineering history and discovering contemporary history of what had just happened in the near past.
What's interesting is you and Ralph Nader share a certain thing in common, which was Ralph used to tell me you don't have to worry about the world as long as a kid can get access to a library. Because if you get access to a library, you can find out information, find out what's relevant. And that's why you've been one of the top people warning about the cultural indoctrination and infiltration of public libraries against it, that try to change our kids' perspectives and not make it an independent repository of just of information rather than indoctrination, as some people would like to make it.
And by the way, I was blessed to get to meet Ralph Nader about like 1997. Like I said, I was giving speeches in Dallas and in New York, and twice I was places where he was speaking, and he was so nice. And I went to dinner with him and his sons when I was like 23 years old, and they were really cool people. I think like Lebanese Americans, and so yeah, I got to meet all these amazing people who I would see as a real liberal, Ralph Nader, but very respectable, good guy. Then I got to meet like General Benton K. Parton, former head of Air Force Weapons Development that led the anti-communist crusade. And then I got to meet like Ted Gunderson, the former top FBI agent that exposed all the child kidnapping rings. Because, there was not a lot of people doing this at that point. And so you immediately were like, oh, here, come on the curtain. You know about this? And it was pretty exciting.
Well, this is the amazing thing. And we're going to get it into some of your discourse because for anybody who knows you, whether they love you or hate you, you are extremely knowledgeable in historical facts. When you're keeping up and maybe even taking over with Joe Rogan, you know the facts. Where it becomes problematic for some and where they get on you is mixing in the historical facts with hyperbolic predictions or hyperbolic descriptions of the present time, which allows some people to demonize you and which could potentially lead people the wrong way. So first question first, before we...
Let me just interrupt you in a minute. I can't.
No, go for it, please.
I do get hyperbolic, and I am real, and I'm not putting on an act, and so I do got out of control sometimes. Today I went wild on air. Hadn't happened in a few months, but for whatever reason, I'm a little manic, whatever you want to call it. Absolutely. And there have been times in my life, people said, why did you tell people in a deposition? Well, maybe I had like a form of psychosis. I think we all do when we get lied to by the mainstream media about WMDs in Iraq and about Jussie Smollett, all things. We start thinking everything's a lie. And so I've gotten cynical before and said, I don't believe anything you're saying and you're a liar and screw you. And then later you figure out, hey, you got too big a platform. You hurt people. The difference is I didn't do it on purpose, but you're absolutely right. I have tried. In fact, many times last year, I've just stopped the show and left. I'm about to blow up and go crazy. And I just get off the air because I get too emotional and too upset. And it's usually because, I got heartburn and I'm mad or I twisted my ankle that day or whatever. There's usually some family issue or something. So I totally hear you in that I have done things and I have said things that are wrong and I've made mistakes. The difference is I did not ever do it on purpose and I never did it to hurt innocent people. But here's the difference. The big corporate media lies to us on purpose, tries to divide us on purpose. It's in the WikiLeaks where this top professor of psychology is telling Hillary, we need to use culture war to divide and control people. So the difference is I never cynically tried to do things, and I've certainly learned a lot. And I think in the balance, 30% of what I've done has been bad and hurtful. 70% has ended up being positive. And as the years go on, I'm like 90% positive now, 10% negative because I'm learning. I'm 47. I'm self-trained, and I'm trying to figure this out like everybody else. And I think the viewers and listeners get that. But if I go back to Charlie Manson thing, they're going to say about this interview, they're going to lie about it and say, he's the guy doing this currently, or he's the guy doing that, or you shouldn't have him on air. Charlie Manson ordered people murdered. He got to be interviewed because we all, like Bill Maher said about me, everybody gets to speak, including Alex Jones. And who you ought to fear and who you ought to worry about is anybody saying we don't have a right to hear this man or this woman. Whoever's telling you that is the same people that say the DNC needs to read everybody's text messages in live time to make sure they don't question Fauci or they don't question an election.
Alex, only to push back on one point. If I suspect if Charlie Manson were still alive and had started a YouTube channel, they might successfully take down his channel. YouTube said in response to your interview on Joe Rogan, they don't ban individuals, but they do shut down channels. But the point is well taken. Is that touche. Yeah, exactly. You probably wouldn't give Charlie Manson a channel for prison, but he's allowed to be interviewed, which I think is the argument they've got letting me on. The point is, I'm not Charlie Manson. No, and that's the point I want to get back to. In your deposition, this is as far as we're going to get into it. The clip that went viral, you said, maybe I suffer from a form of psychosis, whatever. You're not a doctor. You don't diagnose yourself. But I think a lot of people now can understand the feeling of gaslighting, having realized that you've been lied to at the highest forms of government. And it creates, I'm not saying psychosis, but it creates a trauma, a distrust, where you begin to question everything and you begin to make, you immediately jump to the conspiracy explanation. You immediately jump to alternative explanations reflexively.
And that's a better way to say it, is you create a knee-jerk reflex of the opposite.
Exactly.
And then you cynically, sarcastically, because I say horrible stuff on there sarcastically sometimes. So 99% of the time I mean exactly what I'm saying. Then I say some horrible sarcastic thing like, maybe I should blow my head off. And then, somebody goes and files an emergency injunction saying, put me in a rubber room. Obviously, it's hyperbole. Exactly. So that's what I'm getting at is I said maybe some type of a form of psychosis, because literally back in the past, I go back 10 years ago, I would get on air, and I wouldn't call it laziness because I have news articles, give opinions that I have guests on, whatever. But I would sit there and go, oh, let me hypothetically say this or that, and not understanding how big I already was. Now they go back in time and they would take out of context where I would sit there and do, I can see this, I can see that. Now, because of editing, here's an example, and I'll shove about it. I was talking about this big, very successful black liberal commentator, Joe Budden. And he was attacking me and Andrew Schultz for having me on his show, saying you shouldn't have KKK Alex Jones on, you shouldn't have Candace Owens on, she's KKK. And I said, that's outrageous to say that. I hate the KKK, and so does Candace Owens. And I said, how dare you claim you're all liberal and great, but you don't complain about what's happening to the 3 million Muslims in death camps in China or the million Christians and Buddhists. And I said the name of that group. I will not even say the name of that group. It doesn't even sound like the N-word, but they successfully use that, confuse people because the public's so dumbed down that people now believe I said you don't care about the Word.
Yep.
So at a certain point, things are so weaponized now, you can't even communicate with people because they know how to manipulate. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, I mean it's a very Orwellian system. But I think the other thing that you're partially the product of is of the Gen X generation. You know, we grew up where MK Ultra was already a public fact, where all of the FBI, COINTELPRO was a public fact. Unlike the boomers, unlike prior generations, we didn't have that illusion. And then that's reinforced. I mean, for example, when you're 17, starting out looking into going into public access and broadcasting, there's a little kid testifying before Congress claiming that they witnessed kids and babies and incubators having their head, well, I won't even go into the details of it, but traumatized and murdered by Iraqi soldiers in order to go into the first Iraqi war, and we got to witness lies in live time. And but it took many years before it ever came out the whole truth. That in fact that was just one big fat long fabrication, and that was one of your.
And for folks that don't remember. Exactly. Folks don't remember. She's 17. They claim she's 12. She's never been to Kuwait. Her dad owns a PR firm, and she says she saw Saddam and his men murder all these babies in incubators. Bush Sr. gets up on TV. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, keep it 30,000 foot level. We know the info at large, but yeah, explain the context.
Well, no, sure. And my point is, they launched a war that under the sanctions and the ensuing 20-something years killed tens of thousands of U.S. troops and millions of Iraqis died, all based on a lie. There were no babies in incubators. There were no troops throwing them out of incubators. None of what they did to the babies happened. It didn't exist. And so exactly, that's why I got to where you learn about Operation Northwoods. You learn about the Gulf of Tonkin. You learn about all these real events and staged events. And then you're just like, screw you. I don't believe a word you say. Like, here's an example. CNN put out footage which looks like the Taliban killing 20-something prisoners. Video looks real. Taliban's evil. I don't doubt they did it. But it's CNN, and I'm like sitting there going, well, I don't blame people not believing this. So at a certain point, it's like if I've told a lie 1,000 times on purpose, if I've cried wolf 1,000,000 times, it doesn't matter if I said the sun came up, people are going to question it. See where I'm going with that? Well, and even if I'm wrong, so let's say CNN's right, that they killed those people, it's terrible. They killed those commandos. Okay, I have a right to say they didn't kill them. Well, so even if I'm right or wrong, I have a right.
Alex, and this is the thing that people learn later on when they get to a certain size, that their words resonate in ways that they couldn't have imagined and didn't happen when they were smaller. And I'm not trying to compare you to PewDiePie with no but. It's a similar thing happened with when PewDiePie's got 100 million followers and he says something that can be misinterpreted. A percentage of his followers are going to misinterpret it. And I'm not even talking about what happened in New Zealand as though that was a result. But
no, you're totally right. You're totally right. With great power comes great responsibility.
Exactly. And so Spider-Man. And so I mean that's exactly it. So you say something like, which can be misconstrued, it will be misconstrued. And the bigger the enemy that you have become, the more it will either be deliberately or accidentally misconstrued. And so you go through that growing pain. And I, having followed your story now for long enough, I think I can see it. And having seen the Megyn Kelly interview, like you can never apologize enough for the things that people want to hold over your head. And I think you've learned things now that.
Well, also, I mean, not to get into that whole case, but we are subpoenaing her and them. I said it all happened on tape. They edited it together to say I said it didn't happen to sue me. I mean, the level of deception is just insane.
Well, that's one thing I wanted to get into is there's not only been an extraordinary. You're not only the most banned, most deplatformed, most censored individual in the world these days, but you're also one of the most libeled about, lied about, defamed individuals in the world these days. And I was wondering, just from a broader context, that you've achieved extraordinary things that, I can't imagine you thought at 20 you would ever achieve. Did you think at times, it's going to be a lot, like it seems to me part of the reason the system does this is to not only use you as an example to do it to other people, but also to stop another Alex, like what they're doing to Julian Assange. They want no more Julian Assange.
Oh, 100%, 100%.
They want no more Alex Joneses. Why do you stay in the fight despite all the harassment you get?
Okay, well, I'll let a secret out here. People always say, don't let the enemy know what's really going on. But it's more important that my listeners and supporters know what's going on. I've only gotten sophisticated in the last 6, 7, 8 years, and I've gotten more sophisticated as it goes. I'm learning more all the time. And because the system is so discredited, used to we hear a prime minister or a president, we believed it, but now they've lied to us so much, it's going to be a Joe Rogan, or it's going to be a Robert Barnes, or it's going to be somebody seen as an outsider. And so what I learned is when the establishment attacked me quite a bit over the years, it actually built me up with the public. And so they weren't sophisticated enough to know their attacks on me is actually what built me up to a certain point. And then, Barnes, I'm sorry, I was going off a rabbit trail. What was the question?
And I mean, I'll interject there, because this is the one thing that the media either doesn't understand or does understand, is that by banning someone like you, as opposed to allowing your discourse, however offensive people think it is, to be debated publicly, they legitimize you among people who might not have otherwise ever heard of you. And they basically silence you to people who would have never watched you in the first place. And what ends up happening is that the people who were inclined to believe what you were saying before, even if it's wrong, and now we're going to get to a couple of examples, are going to be more inclined to believe it now, because the distrust in the authority is such that if they do something, people are going to assume there's a nefarious reason for which they're doing it, and they're going to presuppose the truth even when you make a mistake. It's the
exactly. Now, just to answer the question, because it popped back in my head, just to answer the question quickly. What's happened is, why do I stay in the fight? I'm a fighter, and there's also the great frustration of what you said when you started the show here. I have to sit there and watch dozens of platforms say whatever they want about me, and then I can't respond on those platforms. It's like a message in the bottle on my own show at Infowars.com and Band.video, and a big audience does come here, thank God. They come and they decide when to defend me. So it's almost like I'm a quadriplegic politically. I've got my little area and I'm stuck on this island, and then I'm being attacked and bombarded. And I'm not trying to say I'm a victim, but that's how it is. Then people tune in. They know what's really being said. They know I'm a real person. They know I'm apologetic for mistakes I've made. They know they exaggerate the things I've done that are wrong. And so they come back and defend me. So the reason I stay in the fight is A, I'm a fighter, but B, they want to destroy me. They want to put me in prison. They're not just trying to sue me into oblivion. They have open subpoenas from the Justice Department. They're trying to say I led the Capitol attack. They've got open grand juries on other things, like treating me like I'm Al Capone. I mean, they have the FBI, the Justice Department, and the organized crime people after me. They went and it's a thing called G2. I had perfect corporate credit. We never do chargebacks, and we had like less than 2% credit card bills, a percentage. And they just went and put a designation 3 years ago, hate. And bank accounts I had 20 years were taken away. Everything was kicked off. And now you see that's happening to Trump. It's happening to everybody. I mean, it's true authoritarianism. It's true global social credit score. So now this is simply survival. People ask, my God, how are you taking all these attacks? Well, I better take them and fight back, because if they know what they're doing, and they have a formula, if they can cut off my revenue stream, they intend to indict me, but not till they get to that point. Because if I've got revenue stream, I can get good lawyers and have still enough media to fight them. But they want to put me in jail. They want to put Trump in jail. Look, Trump's got big problems. So do I. None of us are perfect. But he's not a criminal, either am I. And so we become symbols of liberty and freedom for what you just hit earlier. They want to make an example out of me. I'm not naive. And 5 years ago, no exaggeration, Hillary ran the last 6 months of the campaign, mainly against Trump on Alex Jones. She ran tens of millions of dollars of ads on just one ad buy on one subject alone against Trump, saying I was his brain, which was not true. And so I knew then, I said, I'm not this important. I mean, I knew, because I went from having like 5 million listeners a day to having like 20 million a day by the election. And that was all their attack, building me up to be this thing they thought would hurt Trump. When that project failed, they went even crazier. And so I understood it wasn't me. It was that there was a lot of off-color stuff. There was a lot of crazy stuff I said out of context. I was the craziest thing they could find. They chose me like Frankenstein, but built me up even bigger, you see. And then when that didn't work, now they're completely crazy because they made me 10 times bigger. Now they've been attacking more. Now I'm even bigger. And it's like insane. And so it's Newtonian physics. Every action, opposite equal reaction. So they keep, it's like a cheesy analogy of Godzilla, where he's radioactive, he gets nuked so he can blow up, the other monster. And that basically, now I'm this big radioactive monster, and I'm like telling them, please stop. I don't want to fight anymore. I just want peace. I don't like where this is going. And they just can't stop. So they just keep firing all their weapons at me, and it just makes it bigger. And it's the same thing with the populist movement. They're trying to say questioning elections is terror, or questioning lockdowns is terror. And they're announcing we're going to have Homeland Security and the U.S. military go after people. That's making everyone get radical, and it's leading towards a giant war. I don't want that. But it doesn't matter. They're going to, I'm sorry, I'm ranting. No, they're saying I want that. So it doesn't matter what I really do. I'm now going to be the symbol of a civil war in America.
This is the irony, by the way, Alex. I mean, we'll get over some of the things that you said that were, that can offend people, if that's the criteria for getting deplatformed. But you have the president of the United States saying, in substance, the same thing that you're saying, for which you get deplatformed. But when the president says it on the podium to the entire world, it's somehow acceptable. But the deplatforming of you on YouTube it's an interesting thing, because you no longer can defend yourself. Only people who are there can talk about you behind your back effectively, or when you can't respond. The only people who get to interview you, Vice, 60 Minutes, all very adverse. I mean, I would say dishonest media. And then anybody else like myself who might have legitimate issues with you, which we're going to discuss. I'm not allowed. I'm going to be castigated as an extreme. And so basically, they deplatform you. They say what they want.
Oh, they're going to lie and say I said things I never said. Well, they always do.
But you might have said some things. It doesn't matter. The criteria for being dehumanized and deplatformed was not about saying legitimately offensive things. If you slandered people, if you defamed people, that's what the court's for. They'll figure it out there. And so long as you don't get deplatformed systematically from every platform on earth. But in doing this, what they've done is they've taken you off. They say what they want about you. They limit who can talk about you. And then they demonize everybody else who is not just, making a hit piece after you. But all that said, my diatribe over. Some of the things you say, because you're a personality on the radio, you want to be, I don't want to say hyperbole, but you're entertaining a crowd, but you're also trying.
You subconsciously learn that when you say wild, crazy stuff, people tune in, and so it's like a seal claps his flippers, he gets a fish. Yeah.
Okay, so now. Some of the things, and this is where people have a problem with you, where they call you a conspiracy theorist, where I like to say, if you toned it down and maybe explained it more eloquently, it wouldn't be quite so shocking. The one thing you're known for, I looked up your big 5 conspiracy theories that you promoted, the gay frogs, and beyond that audio bite, there's some science behind it, which is attenuating the absurdity of the statement, but the absurd statement is still out there for everyone to pick on. Some of the things you said about the thing you're in court for now, which are taken out of context. I've always said, when it comes to conspiracy theories, you have 3 general forms. You have the denial that it ever happened. You have the denial that it happened the way it did happen. And you have the admission that it happened the way it happened, but denial of the reasons for which. And you, in challenging and in questioning, will raise all 3 of those variations. But sometimes giving legitimacy to some of those more outlandish options, which might influence people to do certain things.
Well, exactly. You give the number out. Here's the old talk radio format, but they would do safe subjects. Like, are you for this quarterback, or is he a bad quarterback? Or should they fire this basketball coach, or should they give a new contract? Well, I would then say, did this happen or did it not happen? And it would be great callers calling in. I used to be mainly a caller show. And then they can then stitch that together and show one view, which even I still have a right of the First Amendment to do. Still, they can misrepresent it. And I can see how then, once I have all this power, then there are crazy people that dial into that and then are influenced by it. And so I do realize that. But the idea, again, that we've got to restrict free speech to counter that, that's impossible. I mean, hell, again, they're claiming there's white supremacists are the number 1 threat in America. They hardly exist. I mean, outside of like stupid KKK events that are super rare. So they're saying the main threat to America is the KKK. Again, that's a conspiracy theory.
Yeah, and one of the things I want to talk about is some of your sources of information. You are one of the biggest platforms for independent whistleblowers in the world. And this goes to people left or right, whether it's Snowden and Assange, or whether it's Bill Binney. And
I've interviewed the Pentagon Papers guy. I've interviewed, I've interviewed Cindy Sheehan. I've interviewed thousands of whistleblowers, most of the prominent ones. Daniel Ellsberg, is the first name I'd pull up. But absolutely, I mean, that's what I'm really proud of. That's really what made the show super famous, was that it was more Joe Rogan-y early on. It was minus the calls. So I did calls he doesn't. I would have cool people on, and now I'm so black sheep that no racist thing a minute. I'll be Jones attacking black sheep now. No, that means, for folks that are new and young, black sheep just means a different sheep, because most of them are white. I'm the outcast here, so a lot of folks will not come on my show just because they're afraid of the attack. But before I became the devil incarnate 6 years ago, I mean, I was able to interview everybody, and it was pretty amazing. And that's what made the show successful, is that we had a big show with a big platform with all these great people interviewing.
Well, an example of that is Francis Boyle, because I remember very early on in this, and you were the first one to tell me that the likely source of the pandemic was from the lab, that this was likely man-made. And that was based on two different things. And I want to get into the second one in a little bit. The fact that you read a lot of white papers. And I want to use the interview in part to educate people how the mode and method you use can lead them to come to their own independent conclusions. How do you build up evidentiary foundations for challenging? When people try to wonder, how does Alex Jones get crazy things right decades in advance? It's in part by just reading what the government and the institutional think tanks are actually writing about in other places. And we can talk about the X-Files and some other fun stuff in that subject matter. But about Francis Boyle, you're one of the few people. Here's a well-respected, well-regarded law professor tenured at the University of Illinois who the institutional press won't give any coverage to at all. Helped write the laws governing biological weapons, trying to limit its expansion into the world. One of the most dangerous.
And I've known him 20 years, so I mean, not bragging, but exactly. Hamid Gul, the head of Pakistani intelligence, the real head of the Taliban during the Mujahideen War, I mean, he would only come on my show. And we had I even admitted this later, we even had the CIA contact us and say, how are you talking to Hamid Gul? And I gave him Hamid Gul's number. I said, call his son. And I called up the Guls and I said, hey, the CIA is going to call you. I'm not trying to, Hamid Gul respected me. That's how I was able to get him on. He died of cancer a few years out, but I had him on a bunch. So, but yeah, I'm sorry, what was the question you were just saying?
Francis, like an example of you looking to well-respected whistleblowers who have a track record of success and white papers led you to a conclusion they're only now admitting a year later that they were suppressing for a year in big tech, which is that this may be a man-made sourced pandemic. Can you talk about, Francis Boyle and why white papers, how you got into that and why you do it?
Well, sure. I mean, Robert, come on. You were saying this at the exact same time as me, so you're just giving me credit here. I have broken a lot of stuff, but the fact that it came out of a lab was not broken by me. The Indians had access to a CRISPR machine. They weren't let in on the club and Lancet. They were writing a study to cover it up at the time, 16 months ago, that you're not supposed to publish the fact that they scanned the virus, and it was 5 viruses cut together with a gain-of-function HIV delivery system spike protein added. And then the Australians scanned it and found the same thing. And then the discoverer of HIV virus, who won the Nobel Prize over in France, the French scientist, I forget his name, he said the same thing. He looked at the scan. And so this was like saying, that Rhode Island's made out of granite, or the Statue of Liberty's in New York. I mean, it's known that it was a manufactured virus in the lab, which they released because they could control it and then scare everybody. And so, yeah, we knew from major white papers, scientific papers, studies written by major groups that was the case. Then the Lancet came out, written by Peter Daszak, who didn't want his name on it. Those emails have come out. The head of the Wuhan lab project to gain a function coronavirus under Chapel Hill and Fauci. And they went and said, oh, you better withdraw that. So they didn't say the paper was wrong. They withdrew it under pressure of billions of dollars being pulled in academic funding to the entire Indian government. And so then I went and saw a bunch of other scientists that had looked at it, and they said, no, it's completely man-made. And they said, they predicted back in February last year, they said, if anybody does a classic vaccine for this was in February and March, if anybody makes a classic vaccine, attenuated virus, and not the other ones they made, the mRNA and others that go after the spike protein, it's going to be a false HIV positive when you take this vaccine because it's HIV is the shell. And sure enough, remember, the Australian government put out their first vaccine that was a regular vaccine, and people were testing positive for HIV, which then confirmed what the Indians had already said. But it's not like they're confirming some nebulous thing. You can see on these viruses the splices, the P shuttle gene, where they put it in. So I'm no microbiologist, I'm no genetic engineer, but this was known. So most of my job is incredibly simple. But here's another example. This real quick, and I'll shut up. I was the first on air in 1995. By 97, I was on local radio. So all these people were flooding me with stuff, and I was on shortwave, and I'd syndicated the show to a few other stations. And so I had medical journals sent to me, medical journals on biology, medical, all this stuff. And it was like, ethics. Should we be splicing humans and animals like we've done in all these countries? They had studies where they were splicing humans and animals. And should we be letting them gestate inside bovine that are also part cow, part human clones, so they won't reject it? So I'm on the air in like 1997 reading scientific reports about human animal clones. This sounds like space, science fiction stuff. Well, notice a month ago, the Congress would not pass a law banning human-animal hybrids. Now, why are human-animal hybrids so important? Well, a human has rights, and even animals have rights. But if it's a new creature that's alien, a splicing, it has no rights.
Well,
and so they said, no, we're not going to have a prohibition on human-animal clones. And so there I am telling people 25 years ago this is going on, and now it's all confirmed today.
How do we even get into the splicing? I mean, the human animal hybrids, which you talk about. I mean, what is this for anybody who doesn't know? Because I thought I understood it, but I thought it involved animal parts in humans, like valves and whatnot, and which is where I think some people might lose you. And you're saying gestating cross-human breeds in an animal. It sounds like that's what you're getting at. Whereas it sounds like the more understandable explanation is animal parts in humans for medical purposes, which has been a practice for a little while. Which is where I think.
Well, it's both. It's both. So just type this in. Anybody watching can do this. Let me give the exact headline in my mind. It's human-animal hybrids are gestating at labs and farms. It's one or the other. Animal-human hybrids are gestating at labs across the U.S., and that's like 5 years old MIT. And so, but see, you can't just grow that heart in a petri dish. They're trying to do that. What they do is that they create an animal-human clone that basically does at the embryonic level just look like a bag of a placenta. And then they don't have systems that, these so-called biowombs where you see like a baby goat or a baby sheep and it's in this bag and these vessels come in. Well, there's a animal that's basically in a coma right behind the wall there that's all coming out to. They haven't invented tanks that grow creatures yet. And so using mainly cows, they're able to create a humanoid that's part cow, usually a part of that very cloned cow, so the cow doesn't reject it. And then you can grow up a humanoid larger in utero, to then get larger organs out of. And so that's the industrialization of these labs. And they call them biotanks, but a biotank is a cow. And they don't show the public this because it would freak them out. But it's in all the medical literature.
Yeah, I mean, what's extraordinary, I did a show for just a couple of months down there, and by the time I was through the show, I thought legal work was hard. And there was the amount of research, the amount of work. I mean, you're completely unscripted. There's no teleprompter anywhere near the room. You're talking instantaneously right to the millions of people on a daily basis. You're trying to challenge institutional narratives on a daily basis while being attacked on a daily basis by almost every power that be. But I think what's underestimated when I explain to people what is and why is Alex Jones, I said it's an extraordinary amount of reading. You're talking about hundreds of articles a day. You're talking about a combination. It's not just the clickbait. It's not just Twitter. It's not just some small headline. It's detailed articles from a wide range of sources that are international, plus human sources of a wide range of whistleblowers from all around the world that you've developed relationships over the years. In terms of that work ethic, is that something you always had? Is it native curiosity? What is it that keeps you going at that level of energy that's required to do what you do?
Well, I mean, I've always been a little bit of a manic person. So I'm like you and I sit around, smoke cigars, eat a big dinner. We're totally calm for 3 hours. But you've got a lot of energy too, Robert. In your co-host here, I watch the show almost every week. So it's great to be here. So I mean, really, I'm exhausted. And so once I get on the show, I'm a little manic because it's either, pass out on the ground because I'm so tired or be manic about this and drop the information. So it's kind of like when you're in the spotlight, you've always got energy. I mean, that's really where the energy comes from. And there's also the frustration because I know this stuff is real. I mean, I remember this because my ex-wife broke water on my first child, who's almost 19 now, Rex Jones. And I wanted a pizza that night, and I was editing a film on my computer. Then I went to get a local pizza at Conan's Pizza. And I'd been on the air that day covering spider goats, part spider, part goat, so that they create through their udders, through the milk, body armor that can be purified out and is now used in a lot of classified stuff. We're talking about a rope that's.
Did John Ronson mention this in his book, The Men Who Stare at Goats? This sounds familiar to me.
I actually saw the movie. I didn't read the book, and I know John Ronson, but that's Ministeric Goats was a General Stubblebine and the Pentagon at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, trying to use psychic powers to kill goats.
Among other things.
That's another one.
Well, so
among other things, yeah. But the point is, the story's funny because I'm sitting there getting the pizza, and a guy pokes me in the back. And he goes, I used to listen to you, but I heard your show today. So I had the CEO of a company that was in like CBS News about the spider goats and how they were creating body armor with it for the Pentagon. And the guy said, "You're a liar. We can't splice spiders with goats and everything." And I just remember, so that was 19 years ago. That was almost 19 years ago. And I mean, it's real. Anybody can look up spider goats. So I'm not the one. Look.
No, I was just going to say this is where, and I'll bring it into the 5G mind control thing. This is where the terminology is that splicing spider goats, people are envisioning a goat with 8 legs, as opposed to splicing in a certain gene, or I'm going to use the wrong term, from a spider into the development of a goat, which is a little easier to visualize and a little less dramatic. And in the same way, like this.
No, you're right. That's what it is. It's a goat. It's a goat that has spider genes that have been spliced into its mammary milk production genes, so that it produces, instead of a regular protein for the babies, it produces the protein of the spider.
Yeah. Now I'm going to bring this up just because Stephen Goldstein, we're not discussing this pending litigation. He hasn't been found guilty of defamation. That hasn't gone to trial yet, but we're not talking about.
Well, please let me address that. Please let me address that without getting into the case, because you guys are so gentlemen to let me run on. But I'm famous for that.
Quickly, because I don't want to.
All over the news, it says it.
I don't want to discuss pending litigation, but please respond.
Well, you can pull up the Wall Street Journal that owns MarketWatch with the headline, "Alex Jones found guilty for writing the book, Nobody Died at blah, blah, blah." I'm not in the book. I didn't write the book. It's not true. And so they just lie. And now I see it all over Twitter. Jones already lost those cases. That's not true. That's what I'm saying. And I don't even care about that. Other than it's bizarre that the organizations and groups involved in this literally have taken my identity and are always saying that I'm currently saying things I never even said out of context. So I'm famous, and imagine now I'm married to this thing that I did say some of it, and I'm sorry I said it, believe me, but I was never sued till I said I was sorry. And then it was, oh, you admit you lied about it on purpose. No, I didn't. And so those groups are getting famous off me. I'm not getting famous off them. And I'm not saying that. So they say, oh God, he needs to be off the air, please. These lawyers, we need him off the air right now. He is currently saying, go do this, this, and that. And I'm not saying any of it. In fact, for years, I haven't even said the name of it, because I am not going to let these people continue to do this. It's just, I'm not being a victim here. It's fine. I've learned how things work. It's just,
I think you've said some objectionable things. That's what the courts of law are for. The whole issue, as far as the freedom of speech side of it goes, if you say outlandish things, that should be dealt with in the public discourse. If you are doxing, threatening, that should be dealt with according to terms of service. Now, I've watched a lot of stuff you say, and I can see how some of it can get misinterpreted. But when it gets deliberately misinterpreted, or at the very least weaponized, or at the very least one-sided application of nebulous rules, where you have other people without naming names saying exponentially worse things, then you begin to question things. But
well, let's talk about, just because I'm on record here, and I'm glad to get some of this out of the way, not about that case, but others. I've never had my children taken away from me. 2 of my children have gotten big and moved out. The 4-year-old lives with me, and the 13-year-old has decided to live with her mother. None of that's, I didn't lose my children in court. None of that's true. I didn't lose a lawsuit on the place in Connecticut. None of that's true. And so, and I'm just saying, it's bizarre. I have people walk up to me when I'm in a restaurant and they say, "What are these kids? I thought you lost your kids." And it's just like, what even is that? It's like crazy.
Well, it's when they can't discredit the message, they have to discredit the messenger, and they have to tar and feather you in the court of public opinion in order for people not to pay attention to the underlying subject matter. One of the important things I think that you intertwine is like two different concepts. I explained that, to other people when they ask me, is like the core of Alex Jones is a historic populism, that if you understand populism, it's the foundation of almost every freedom movement in the last 1,000+ years. But on top of that, it's an understanding that those who seek power, and particularly those who obtain it, don't tend to be the best human beings amongst us. It's sort of the argument Michael Malice makes for anarchism. And in that same context, you have an understanding of that, but you have a better, richer, deeper understanding of that, of the ideology and the idea of transhumanism. What combines this experimentation between human and other species, what combines forced vaccines and everything that goes into these biological weapons, what unites it with eugenics. What unites it with someone like Jeffrey Epstein, that you called out while everyone else was trying to suppress information about it, is an ideology and idolatry of transhumanism. And can you explain that to the audience? What that is, what that's about, how it
Sure. I'm glad you raised this, because this is the heart of the matter. But let me just say this one thing. And if you got time, I got all the time you guys want. I don't know if your show's over. I'll go another 30 minutes, an hour, wherever you want, or we can end it now if you want. But I saw a thing on Twitter last week that I sent my great crew that's up here working 14 hours straight. And I forgot to play it because I think it embodies everything I am. And it is Spain, and it's a bullfight, and they've been throwing the little arrows in the back of the bull to piss it off, and the bull gets mad and jumps into the bleachers and attacks the people. And the headline on the tweet said, "This is Alex Jones versus the mainstream media." And so, is it bloody? Is it crazy? Is it a mess? Is it brutal? Have I, in the process of climbing out of the slime, myself made mistakes and been wrong? Absolutely. And what I later learned was that when you admit you're wrong, that's when they go crazy and attack you. But I still admit I'm wrong, because that's how I get better. Who doesn't admit they're wrong is mainstream media and these big corporations. So if you go back to what you just mentioned, the 1850s, it's all on record. Francis Galton, working off the ideas of Sir Thomas Malthus 100 years before him, and the Huxleys and the Wedgwoods and the Darwins, they were given the British Crown money to develop mind war and to figure out how to suppress and control people and win wars. And they said, you don't win wars, you artificially put people into a modern society, you domesticate them, and you break up the family, and you end men. And if you end men, you will end war. And then the Carnegie Endowment created that as official policy by the 20s. And then they had the League of Nations that failed, the UN, and all of it. You can argue, okay, make everybody effeminate, that'll end war. Isn't really the case. It's super males that are actually trying to make older males abdicate over the responsibility and just shut it down. And so out of eugenics, that goes back to Plato 2,300 years ago, that gets picked up by Sir Thomas Malthus, and then really adopted by the British Empire by the 1860s. And then the Germans, the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, they jump on it and go crazy with it. It then gets adopted in the US, it then gets adopted in Mexico, it gets adopted all throughout South America. Africa adopts it, Asia adopts it, because everybody wants to think they're in the elite. Eugenics happens, Hitler goes crazy, gives it a bad name, but Hitler wanted H.G. Wells and Aldous Huxley and Julian Huxley arrested. Look that up, you want them killed. They had Nazi assassins in 39, 40 trying to find them and kill them. And why? Because they saw them as competing eugenicists, Joseph Goebbels did, that were going to create this omni-eugenics, not a white supremacist Aryan eugenics. And so they saw them as competing factions that needed to be taken out. And so when you see Jeffrey Epstein with the Zorro breeding ranch, and you see these islands, and you see them trying to corrupt scientists, everything at the rock star level is about science. I mean, I'll just say this. It basically goes science, and then you've got royalty, and then you've got just general academia, and then you've got the whole legal system, and then you've got movie stars and sports stars and, the nouveau riche, rich people, and then you've got the middle class, and then you've got the working class, and you've got the big underclass that the elites are trying to expand to have groups they control. And so at the highest levels, it's the scientist. I mean, when a John P. Holdren walks into a Senate hearing, they get on their knees, because he's the guy whose textbook in 74 was adopted as the 50-year plan. And when Klaus Schwab, who's a scientist, who was the head of the UN project for sustainable development, when he walks in, they all kiss his ass because he wrote the plan everybody's following. I mean, so the scientists are the gods. And it's not because they're scientists empowering humans. They're the scientists that work 20 hours a day to bring in this medical tyranny, to bring in the world ID, to bring in all these systems of control that the elites believe are going to give them life extension technology, the ultimate eugenics. But you can't give that to 7.5 billion people. You got to wipe them out first, save the earth, and then have your new civilization move forward from that point. Just like Ian Fleming wrote Moonraker in 1957 or whatever it was, that made it a Roger Moore movie in 1980, whatever it was, where the super rich elitist has his orbital base and is going to release a bioweapon to wipe out humanity. Well, Ian Fleming wrote that because he was around those people. Then you see The Kingsman comes out 5 years ago, the exact plot, basically, billionaire, but now they're going to use electromagnetic programming or 5G to make us all kill each other, which is an allegory of the collapse of society, the post-industrial world, the great leap forward that is the Great Reset, collapsing the social construct, the social contract to make a world that collapses that they control in a controlled demolition, not a world that expands in an egalitarian way. And so now the train is jumping the tracks or being switched from the kind of Christian Renaissance ethos of empower people, classical liberalism, to the false liberalism of the left and the fascist right that is really a eugenics death cult. And now the train is almost on the new tracks, hurtling down the road.
Okay, so here's the thing. This is my issue with, I guess you say a lot in... That
was quite a rant, wasn't it?
Quite a rant. Now, you say a lot.
Sorry.
Some of the information I'm aware of, just from my own knowledge. I know who what's Klaus Schwab is. He's the World Economic Forum guy talking about the Great Reset guy. He was the one, you couldn't say what he said 10 years ago, a few months ago, because it was a big conspiracy theory. And if you said the words, you got in trouble. I know some of what you say. Some of it I'm less familiar with, so I don't know if it's true. And then you run into this issue with everyone else out there. There's a certain element of factual truth, historical truth, what you're saying. And then you go into an interpretation or a prediction, which people are going to have difficulty dissociating or separating from the fact. And you throw in another thing like the 5G and the mind control, which you spoke about with Joe Rogan a couple of years ago. And then this is where I think just the trouble occurs only in terms of how people are going to demonize you for what you've said. When I was talking to someone, I looked up the study that you referenced with Joe Rogan about the mind control, and whether or not it's mind control versus just interference. Like they did double-blind studies with people who slept with their cell phones, and when the cell phones went triggered at a certain frequency, they would have difficulty falling asleep. And there's obvious, from a scientific perspective, call it interference, call it interaction. We know that the high-tension power lines cause certain problems. To go from the interaction to call it mind control, I think, is where, from a branding perspective, you go from being a commentator to what people can too easily write off as a conspiracy theorist, in the sense of using terminology that is not inaccurate, but just hyperbolic to the point of.
No, I get it. You're saying I'm stretching what's there, or I'm hyperbole on top of it. But here's the difference. That's one study that Jamie pulled up when I just talked about that. I remember in the Baltimore Sun in like 1999, as I covered it on air, it was the CIA said, we're working with DARPA to test higher powered cell phones that then we can use and modulate frequencies to test if it can manipulate the public's mind. So that's going on. Here's another example. I was told 25 years ago by an engineer that was putting in Doppler radar. Remember, before 25 years ago, the whole country didn't have Doppler radar. You'd have to see national news and kind of they give you a composite of where the rain was. Now you got Doppler. It tells you exactly what's happening at your house, down to like a block, down to like 30 feet. And he said to me, and the guy's an engineer, he said, we're putting in 5, 6, 7 times the power into these Doppler radars. And I talked to some other engineers, and they said it's dual use, where they're able to ionize the atmosphere and create rain. Now, I thought the guy was crazy, even though he drove a brand new Mercedes and had a hot wife, and he'd come down to the radio station, and I knew he was an engineer that was a private contractor putting in Doppler radars. 10 years later, It's in the Daily Mail and Associated Press and Popular Science. Dubai, using Doppler radar antennas, turned up on high to create nuclei and rain. He wasn't lying. It was all true. So the people running these Doppler radars don't know this, but it has a dual use that they can literally manipulate. Like you said, is it interface with the brain or mind control? Well, you got to crawl before you walk, before you run, before you jump,
Well, I get
or before you pole vault.
The question is if it can interfere with sleep patterns, because everybody knows this. This is studies as to why you should not sleep with your cell phone next to you. If it can interfere with sleep patterns, is that mind control? Is that mind interference? And at which point does the hyperbolic qualification discredit the messenger with the message?
Sure, fine. Listen, as long as I get people to worry about this, be concerned, we should be jumping up, because I mean, here's the deal. I remember that study, a bunch of those studies. You can have an ambulance going on outside. I don't wake up. You can have, my 4-year-old daughter crying in the room next. My wife gets up. I sleep like a dead person. But when I forget and don't turn my phone off and don't stick it in a drawer in another room, the damn thing wakes me up all night. I don't need to study to know it, because they're constantly pinging it every 30 seconds with a bzz, bzz, and it's sending out a magnetic wave. They've tested this on aphids. Aphids don't sleep next to a cell phone. And so, yeah, it's electromagnetically messing with our brain. Our brain is attuned. A man, a woman is attuned to the full moon. Why do you think that happens? Because there's different electromagnetic radiation coming in. The ancients knew that. That's why they call it a lunatic or a lunatic asylum, lunar. Well, they weren't sure why. Now we know different types of waves are coming in. And a cell phone does that too. And the key is, even though it's super low power, it's turning on and off. When in human development are we used to beams that are on and off? They're not. The universe is, you hear the crickets, they don't turn on and off. You hear the waterfall, it doesn't turn on and off. You hear the beach, it doesn't turn on and off with the sound of the beach, and suddenly it's off. These electromagnetic systems are bzz, 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 bzz. And that's just like chips in the brain they're coming out with for all sorts of reasonable medical reasons, but they're all able to flip on and off with very low power, control basically the whole brain, and stop convulsions, stop pain, you name it, all with simple on-off switches. And so the brain understands that. So when it's getting hit with an on-off switch, your body's like, bzz, bzz, it's waking up, which the study shows, it's the flea that defeated the lion, basically, because it shows how unnatural it is to have something that's turning on and off 100%.
Well,
our entire development and evolution has nothing to do with stuff like this. Everything is incremental. Everything is slow. Everything is done that way, and that's why it's so dangerous.
Curious. Well, and in that context, when you early on were warning about some of where things were going in the lockdowns, I remember lots of people saying, oh, that will never happen. We'll never have mass home arrest. We'll never have 2-year-olds having to wear masks. We'll never have forced experimental drugs imposed on people. We'll never shut down the economy of the entire world. And then it all happened. Boom, 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 boom. It's understanding the mindset and the motivation of the people involved, that you give them a little bit of room, they're going to take it to its logical conclusion. In that context, though, in terms of, like, people have, complimented me on my memory recall. I get nowhere near your memory recall. Where did you, and how do you, be able to remember something like, oh, in 1999, I did a TV show. I remember that article in that paper talking about this subject. I remember we were talking about a documentary I just seen, like a late 60s one, about a CIA taking over something. And not only did you remember it, you could start quoting the lines from it. Well, is that something you always had? Is that a skill set you developed, like Cicero building rooms in a house? How did you get that level of memory recall?
Well, I mean, I'll just be honest, from drinking too much and stress and everything, I don't have a photographic memory anymore, or they call it didactic, or they got a bunch of names for it. But until I was about 40, I remember basically everything that ever happened in great detail. I could speed read all that now. That's gone away. I mean, if my brain's in the right mode and I'm really focused, and if I'm interested in something, like a beautiful woman, I'm married, she's great, but beautiful woman you remember you have sex with one time, you remember every damn thing about it because it was amazing. And so if my brain is really into a book or into a clip or into a film or into a sunset, I don't forget it. Everything else now I kind of tune out. Used to, that's how I kind of got really hyper, was I try to talk about stuff because I had so much information. So it's almost a blessing as I've gotten older that's dimmed a lot. And so I'm able to, kind of slow down a little bit and not spew out so much information. But I mean, you got a great memory too. Both you guys do, and you're kicking ass. And all I'm saying is, I want people to understand that there is a radical scientific elite that thinks the public are idiots who have taken control of human development and are building a breakaway civilization in their own words. And we better address them at their level, become informed about what's going on, and stop complying with the post-human world robotic takeover they're building. It's a very dystopic world they're building. It's not for the environment. They believe they're gods. They believe they're elites. They believe that it's like Ray Kurzweil said, I don't believe in God yet. I'm going to become God. Well, and he said, yeah, we might let you live. We might step on you like a bug. We might keep you like a house plant. These are people talking about us like we're house plants. Charlie Munger, Bill Gates' lawyer, Warren Buffett's lawyer, best buddy, their mentor, came out 2 weeks ago and said, I want communism like China. And I think we ought to arrest people we disagree with. I mean, you know, and you're like, I told Sonny they better arrest the head of Jack Ma, and they did arrest him, Sonny. We need to be like that, Sonny. And these guys have put unlimited money into AI and surveillance, and now they have press conferences where we're going to read all your text messages and make sure you're not putting out disinfo. And we're going to, I mean, it's like light years past. So here's the deal. If I've made mistakes, I admit to them, execute me for mistakes, kill me. But then what about folks that lie about WMDs and want to read your text messages and say they want to be like communist China? So if I'm bad, send me to prison. Okay, Alex Jones is a bad guy. You know, let's deal with him right now. He is a bad person. But what about Charlie Munger? What about these people? That's what I'm saying. They got the power and they're saying, let's arrest her. I'm sure you saw that, guys. Did you see Charlie Munger?
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah. I have a long dealings, very adversarial with Charlie Munger. So that's another story, as I like to say. But in that context,
well, hey, I want to invite you both on my show that doesn't get you in too much trouble.
Oh, sure.
I want, come on. I didn't know, you know everybody. Barnes, Charlie Munger, boy, isn't he a piece of work?
He's a very unique individual. With a lot of interesting connections. People should look into the law firm, Munger Tolles, some of its history, some of its connections, some of who they've represented over time. And there's a lot of interesting stories there in that context. But speaking of big people, you've had no fear going after big people that most people are terrified of. And one example of that during this past year was there was a degree, even on the political right, even amongst independent press people initially, but was not to talk bad about the great Bill Gates. That the Bill Gates was some sort of immaculate God here to help us through this tough time and was going to protect us. And you were the first person, at least I witnessed, that was outing Bill Gates from day one, that his agenda is not an American agenda. His agenda is not what most people. But when you go after someone like that, any reluctance, or do you just say, charge ahead?
Well, Barnes, I don't know how much we can say here, but you represented me some and done a great job. You know some of the inside baseball that I'm sure things should be very nice for me if I didn't talk bad about Bill Gates, or other people. But I mean, that said, I don't want to be owned like a baseball card, in his baseball card collection. I became aware of Bill Gates a long time ago, and just the fact that he was running everything. I mean, and then I learned that his mom was on the IBM board, and that basically IBM couldn't get around the antitrust laws that were still being enforced in the 80s. So they went to Bill Gates to basically, they'd sell the computers, but he would sell the operating system. And then his father was the head of Planned Parenthood and a eugenicist, and so was he. And then I learned about Thomas Watson and IBM and how all his money went into a trust. Well, Bill Gates and his mother got the money from that trust. This is actually in mainstream documents, but almost no one knows this. So the Carnegie money, the Rockefeller Foundation money, the Astor money, the Vanderbilt money, the Henry Ford money, I mean, we're talking trillions today, was all put into a eugenics project that Bill Gates is the titular head of. But now that all this has come out, they've moved the halo off of Bill onto his wife because of the Jeffrey Epstein connections and the fact that he was working very closely with Jeffrey Epstein. We don't have any evidence that Bill Gates was involved in any of the illegal sexual activities, but he was certainly flying around with him, staying with him, lying about that in the media, staying with him in New Mexico, in New York, in Paris, and using that as a way to control scientists. Because again, if you control scientists, you control everything they believe. And so Bill Gates is a very important player, along with the Queen of England's son that's heavily involved. And that's why it came out at Wuhan that Google and Facebook and all of them were heavily invested in the Wuhan lab gain of function coronavirus. And they were controlling the fact checking from there. You're like, why are they all involved? Well, this is the big project. This is the big takeover plan. And they all want a seat at that table to have that knowledge and be involved in that. And so they didn't just cover up what happened with the virus because they were making money off the vaccine, because Google and others are heavily invested in it. So is Facebook. But I mean, they're heavily invested in the whole project. And the more you learn about that, the more amazing it is.
What I always just found amazing was just the degree to which they went after Joe Rogan for his en passant comment about vaccination, and because he's not a doctor, but the deference that they give to Bill Gates. This is where the deference they give to Bill Gates on all things related to this, despite the fact that he's a computer developer and also not a doctor. But Alex, there's going to be the rules for thee, but not for me going on through all of this. It is, at the very least, the way the power structure is set up right now, the way the public discourse is set up right now. You can attack Joe Rogan, but you can't attack Bill Gates until it becomes incontrovertibly indefensible to defend Bill Gates. I forget where I was going with all this, but the reality is people are going to be they're not too lazy. They're just too busy to try to get details, to try to understand.
Well, that's where I was going next. That's a great point you made. I mean, I know Joe, and Joe's just as smart as I am or smarter. He was interviewing all these scientists on and off air. He knew about all the censorship. So he knew, I'll put this out, they'll attack me. I'll go, I'm sorry, I'm not a doctor. Then he has on all the doctors to agree with him. And boy, has he not been vindicated in all of this. Now they've got warnings on these shots. All that stuff's going on. And they're trying to censor what medical doctors can say and can't do. And so absolutely, people are not stupid. They're just busy. And when they're told you can't look at something, that's actually the one thing that'll make them look at it. And that's something the establishment is just now figuring out. I mean, yeah, I don't have a medical degree, but I have a right to say what happened to me as a consumer or as a person, my view on something. And if you suppress me, that's really a bad sign. But Bill Gates is not a medical doctor. So why does he get to? Well, because he's put hundreds over the last 40 years, not just 20, hundreds of billions of dollars of his money and Warren Buffett's money and IBM's money, not just Microsoft money, into this global government medical project, because they figured out medicine's the way to take over. People will put up with that more than anything else. Hitler had black uniforms and tanks and airplanes. People got pissed and kicked his ass. But if you come in a pink sweater as someone trying to save the earth, it doesn't matter if you said you want to depopulate the planet. He thinks all his PR will be sufficient to cover that up. But it shows the chink in the dragon's armor that they thought that they could use a depopulationist as the face of this whole program.
I mean, one of the ways that you live your belief structure has been always looking at alternative health mechanisms outside of the big pharma infrastructure. And then you ended up just selling it to your own, to your audience to help democratize creating a true independent. You have no corporate advertisers, no big sugar daddy donors, no secret string pullers. And you mentioned that you just don't want to be owned by anybody, and that's a driving motivation for you. What led to the idea of getting into alternative health in the first place? Could you explain, why that was important for you and why you brought it to your audience?
Okay, well, I eat like a pig and I don't exercise enough, but it doesn't mean I don't know what health is and what's good. And I just look at a big market that vitamins and minerals and supplements. Look at Whole Foods. When Jeff Bezos sells them, he's a great guy. When I sell them, it's all fraud and a scam. And that's not true. I go out and I find the highest end supplements that are going to really give people a kick in the pants they're looking for, so they want to come back and buy them again. Basically, it's like drug dealing, but it's legal, it's lawful, and it helps people. It's a very simple business model. Go back 10 years ago, half our sponsors were supplement makers, and we couldn't fund ourselves because they were probably paying us, 10% of what they were making. So I reached out to some of the top makers and I said, hey, what's the best selling stuff? I want to private label it so I make 50% instead of 10%. And I could fund this whole independent media operation. And I take all the stuff that I push. And despite the fact that I eat giant steaks and piles of potatoes and, I'll be honest, have way too much sex with my wife. I'm an animal. Despite all that, it takes your energy away. Despite all that, ladies and gentlemen, could not do it without X2, which is deep earth crystal iodine, which is essential. Go to the UN's own website. UN, 2 billion people have cognitive disabilities, they say, because of lack of iodine in development. Well, fluoride's the bad iodine. So I'm not doing a pitch here. Get your Himalayan salt, whatever, folks. The point is, Jones sells scam products. Concentrated wheatgrass tablets. Wheatgrass will grow hair on your chest, ladies and gentlemen. This is full of all the amino acids. I don't mean to go into a plug. The point is, this is wheatgrass concentrate is not a scam.
No,
I mean, you haven't taken it before, it'll give you projectile diarrhea.
Two things, though. Eat enough carrots or drink enough Sunny D and your skin will turn orange just from the beta carotene. So too much of it, even a good thing, is bad. But setting that aside, I watched a very funny, because I was doing my research today, I watched a very funny John Oliver bit where he went over your supplements and he had some good comedy and he had some unfair comedy, but it might have been the only...
Yeah, he says, I sell the bones of dead birds. Well, technically, a chicken bone broth is the bones of dead birds. It's true.
Well, so as is Jello if it's made the right way with gelatin from bone broth. But this is actually a question that I have. It's a legitimate question that I struggle with myself. You know, when you are relying on ad revenue, people accuse you of tailoring your content to please your censorship overlords. But there's the pressure is no different when you are appealing to your crowdfunding or to your marketing of your products. I think to some extent you might be selling overpriced products. I think people probably appreciate that, and they're buying them despite the fact that they might be more than vitamin D you get in the store because they want to support you and not because they want to support the local store. Fine. But once you start creating content, that is when you're relying on your crowd for funding, are you not feeling something of a pressure nonetheless? It might not be to please your censorship overlords, but are you not feeling like your content is geared now towards the interest of those who are financing your activities?
That was subconscious in the past. All the stuff I got in trouble for, and I'm not trying to give myself a pat on the back, was things that 4chan and 8chan and some of my crew wanted me to cover that was nebulous. And my rule is never cover stuff that is nebulous anymore. There's just too much real stuff that's out there that we can debate that went on, like what made this apartment complex collapse, or why are there riots in South Africa? No one's debating if there are riots in South Africa. So my objective is the same way with the supplements, since you brought them up. I'm going to do market research on that and find out what sells the best and what do people want. And in that case, I 100% give people already made, been out for 10, 20 years, best-selling stuff that's already been tested, already triple tested, because I'm already under a magnifying glass. People are already targeting me. I want my listeners to, alpha power or something that's for libido. Of course this stuff's going to work. I mean, one ingredient in it is known to work. It's called horny goat weed for a reason. I want them to have a good response. Now, so they buy it again. That's just complete honesty. It's a good thing. That's how you should do business. Like, this restaurant cooks the best food we can, so you come back and buy it again. Now let's expand on that. When it comes to what I do on air, there's one customer that matters, just like most of these good restaurants. The chef isn't asking people what they like. It's what he wants to cook. I do not listen to anybody. At least in the past, I did not. I try to control myself sometimes. But I go off of my gut and what I want to cover and what I want to do. We got 50 clips and we got 100, 200 news articles, and we got guests coming in. And there's just straight on doing this. And so that's why when I've been sued all these times, and the judges they go, I know there's somebody telling you what to do, and I know there's a marketing plan for what you say on air. There is no marketing plan. When I sell a T-shirt, I go, that's a cool T-shirt. Let's make a shirt like this. The marketing plan is I say make this shirt, and we see if people want it, and if they buy it, we keep printing it. So that's the market.
Well, yeah.
But I mean, just trying to crystallize this on air. I do not sit there like CNN during a debate, gauging with a focus group which person I like the best. I don't look at that. It's like Luke Skywalker blowing up the Death Star. I've turned off my targeting computer, brother. So there is absolutely, and by the way, the viewers pick up on the fact that I don't care and have no filter. So no, the marketing products, 100%. What works, what sells, what's good, what's got high ratings. 100% marketing's going on. Very simple marketing. What sells? Okay. It's like you go in a whorehouse. Which whore is the best? Well, the one that's got a line around the block. These whores, nobody's lined up for them. Sorry to use a bad analogy, that I've ever done that. You get what I'm saying? These are whores they're lined around the block for. Okay. And it's the same thing. It's like freedom. I mean, I'm promoting the big titted hit, like Robert Duvall says in Network, man. I'm promoting freedom and laissez-faire, what made America great, baby. And I don't need a marketing group to tell me that. And I don't care what anybody tells me. I'm going to keep betting on that number, 1776, like craps over and over and over again, because I'm a degenerate gambler when it comes to freedom, brother.
Well, and in that capacity, I mean, the other thing that helps is you have one of the highest consumer approval ratings of anybody that's in the product business. I mean, that's why it's always ironic when I see people criticize it. It's a criticism that makes no sense. It's not a criticism rooted in fact or evidence. Well,
here's an example. Nobody's got DEA approved pure atomic iodine. They all lie and say they got it. We got to pay for a DEA facility. This stuff cost me $10 a bottle when I can buy it for $2 a bottle. So you could say, hey, that looks like it's marked up more, but a synthetic vitamin D cost me $2 a bottle, but a real vitamin D cost me $10 a bottle, again, that's organic. See, so that's the difference. A synthetic vitamin D versus a real vitamin D is two different deals. That makes sense? Here's an example. What's that, guys? I'm sorry, I'm ranting. Go ahead. I've been on air for a long time, so I'm a little bit crazy.
And glad you could stay on. We usually go for about a little under 2 hours, Alex. So if that's okay, but if you got to check out,
I'm happy to do it. Can I go pee?
Yeah. You can always take a break. If you need to take a break, just let us know. That's no problem.
I'm going to go get a glass of water and hit the head.
I'm going to remove you off, and then I'll talk with Robert.
I'm not going to whorehouses. That was an allegory.
Exactly.
But if you're going to go to whorehouse, you got to go. Hey,
I'll bring you back in when I see you.
You don't want any of the whores in the front room. You want to go, which one's got a line at the door?
No problem.
Well, Robert, I think this one is going to be sufficiently demonetized now. I thought the subject matter, or whatever, it's. I'm glad we could have the discussion. People are going to see this and they're going to come to their own conclusions, and that's what the discussion, that's what the public discourse has to be about. You don't silence people by silencing them. You just drive the discussion underground. What else is going on, Robert? What do you have behind you? What are the books?
Sure. Yeah. So this book for people is Fixing the System. It's one of the best books to understand the intellectual history of populism. You know, Alex puts it in his primal, direct, visceral way, often, visually. But this is sort of the academic version of that. But understanding the history of populism, left to right, going all the way back to Roman days. So it sort of integrates a lot of that historical architecture of information and ideas. And this one is The Devil's Chessboard. It's just one of the books about the Dulles brothers, their building up of the CIA, the OSS prior to that. One of them was Secretary of State, of course. And the way in which they treated the world, the way Alex is describing elites treating the world, that as not as human beings, but as pieces on a chessboard, as cattle in the out in the ranch. And it's very and so it's educational in its own right, written from a left-wing perspective.
Who said it? You kill one person, you're a murderer. Kill a million, it's a statistic. What's the expression, Robert?
Stalin. Good old Joseph. Good old Joseph said that. In between writing letters to his mother asking why she used to beat him when he was 8 and throw him out into the cold. So you get an idea of where Stalin's, mindset came from.
All right, now I see Alex back in. I'm going to let him know that I'm bringing him back in. And he is back in. But hold on, I don't like this setup. It's going to confuse people.
No, I like being on the side. And by the way, you guys have been real gentlemen. Let me run over you. Ask real questions, and I'll be very, very calm and very, very pinched, very, very tactical for you.
I'll say to you what I said to Robert and to everyone else. This is the way discussion should be had. If people want to watch you, listen to you, and come to the conclusions that you are way out there, totally ill-founded, totally out of your element in terms of talking about whatever, they can do that. But this is how the discussion should be had. I don't know when we got into the realm of banning, and I'm putting it in quotes, and I'm going to address this, banning conspiracy theorists, because I don't know what a conspiracy theory is anymore. Someone said, I better apologize to you for calling you a conspiracy theorist. I've been saying the word for a long time. I don't know what's conspiracy anymore, because the term, like all other weaponized terms, has lost all meaning, where a year ago, conspiracy theory was what is today not a proven fact, but rather a mainstream media, Jon Stewart accepted fact. So what do you understand by conspiracy theory as a term? And what do you think when people try to shut you down because they call you one?
I know Barnes knows this because he says I'm great at history. He's even better than I am. And I watch your show too. Even before you had Barnes on, I know you know your history as well. I learned a lot about Canada. Look, they came out with the term. It later came out actually in the Frank Church Committee hearings in the 70s that right when Kennedy got killed, a year after, they found the majority of Americans believed he'd been assassinated, probably by the CIA he was trying to abolish. And so they developed, it came out in congressional hearings, you can look this up. There's even a Wikipedia page. Where did the term conspiracy theory come from? And conspiracy theory came from the CIA in 64, the year after Kennedy was killed, as a way to not have a debate, not engage somebody, because you don't want to hear the facts, like, hey, there were other gunmen on the hill and they arrested some of them, and no. And that rifle couldn't do that, and his head went back. No, you don't debate all that. You just say that's a conspiracy theory, which then the media laughs at. And so today, it's like calling Tucker Carlson a racist. I mean, he doesn't say anything racist. He's a populist. That's why they're so scared of him, because he unifies people. But they go, oh, don't listen to him. He's a white supremacist. So now they say in this new countering terrorism directorate put out by the White House a month ago that the new terrorism is white supremacism. And the new white supremacism is questioning the election or lockdowns. And I read this whole 30-page report on air. I had Robert on about it. Robert, you guys are the lawyer. I mean, under U.S. law, it actually says, what is radicalization and how do we stop it and frustrate it? And we need to even go after members of Congress. Well, questioning elections or questioning lockdowns. I mean, what do you call that?
Well, I mean, you look at the criminalization, I mean, that they announced today, and while the case has some other complexity, they're trying to criminally prosecute someone on the grounds that they want to use it as a precedent to say that if you give someone a vaccination card that doesn't fit their definition of an accepted vaccination card, they're going to call that a federal crime under the healthcare fraud laws. And the healthcare fraud laws were designed for when a doctor lies to Medicare or Medicaid or somebody like that and uses the wires to do so about he did a treatment he really didn't do and that kind of. They're now saying anything you say that anybody, that their new theory, according to the FBI's public release, is anybody who says anything they disagree with in the health that concerns healthcare, even if they themselves are not a healthcare professional, even if it has no nexus to a financial transaction, that you can be criminally prosecuted and criminally punished. And that's the scary direction that it's going in.
And they have Soros-appointed attorney generals sending out subpoenas about people that questioned COVID. Well, I mean, since when is that? They're really trying to, I mean, whoever thought they'd be saying vaccine passports and you're going to have them to buy and sell. This is all happening right now.
Well, and can you, because you were also one of the first people to just track, is for people out there, how can you track information that can predict the kind of things that you've been able to predict ahead of everybody else? One of them was you were from a very early on tracking all of Bill Gates connected groups that were requesting patents on anything. And one of them that came up, and that's how I found out about, was Gates's interest in quantum tattoos. And can you describe for people what this is about, what some of his developments are about, and what that might preview for the future and the risk it poses?
Sure. Bill Gates is funding MIT and Rice University in Texas, of all places, so Texas and Massachusetts, more than 10 major studies. He's also funding a Pentagon study, so I guess it's 11, that is patches you put on the skin that have nanoparticles that are basically glass shards, microscopic shards, but now stuff's so miniaturized, you can have a tracker number or something that's readable that goes into the skin and actually deploys the vaccine, whatever it is they're putting in you. That's all vaccines are now, is just any injection they want to put in you, into your body, and then you can't get it out because the glass continues to work its way into your body. And all we did was point that out, and they said, oh, it's a conspiracy theory. Remember, he was on TV with his wife. She goes, we're not developing any type of implantable chip. That's insane. And Bill's like, well, because everybody used that clip to show he was.
Oh, not just that. I mean, Robert, I never discussed it, but there was an article. What country was it? Sweden or Switzerland, where they were injecting. It's a little rice. It's a rice-sized thing that they inject in your skin, basically to digitize your bank statements, your pay systems, and other information. And it's an injectable.
Yeah, Sweden's trying to make people do it to ride the bus or trains.
So, I mean, this is where, like people have been saying, truth is stranger than friction. Truth is stranger than fiction. And what is conspiracy theory a year ago is news today. And I don't use the term in a derogatory sense anymore. I mean, the whole point is that the term now means so little that, you know, if this is conspiracy theory, then what was Rachel Maddow? What is Brian Stelter, whatever his name is? The meaning is, the word has lost all meaning, so it's no longer derogatory or whatever. It's a way of speaking. But I mean,
it's a way to demonize somebody. I mean, like in Nazi Germany, they said, "Don't listen to them. They're such and such." I mean, that's really what it is. Is a pejorative demonization term saying, "Don't listen to that person. They are a bad person." And now I saw where on Twitter, big news articles out today, they're now blocking tweets and also sending a message saying, "Oh, you might want to know this tweet's disinformation," of people saying, "I don't want a vaccine passport. I don't want a vaccine ID. I don't want a medical passport." And again, people ask, how do I know all this? Klaus Schwab's written 4 books I've read. He's written 2 others that are out of print that aren't online I'm trying to get right now. Okay, so I got a rare book dealer trying to find somebody who wrote like in the 80s. But I read 4 of his damn books, okay? He wrote one 5 years ago, and he gave a speech 5 years ago on French TV. Pull it up.
The Fourth Industrial Revolution.
Klaus Schwab. Pardon me?
The Fourth Industrial Revolution. Which one was that?
Yes. Yeah, he talks about that. Yes, I've read the Fourth Industrial Revolution and the Great Reset, absolutely. And so, he's on French TV talking about the Fourth Industrial Revolution when it came out 5 years ago. Exactly. And he says, well, soon you'll have chips you wear and then chips in your body for a world medical ID. And we're going to have this and do that. So that's how I know they're going to do this. This guy is running things.
Exactly. And now you followed a wide range of groups and put a lot of groups that a lot of people didn't know about on the public agenda because of, from Bohemian Grove to Bilderberg Group. How did you first get interested in them? How did you first get on top of them? And did you ever have any nervousness about trying to continue to expose them in a time period where there was a lot of desire for that not to occur?
And wait, Alex, before you start answering, I want to preface this so that people can contextualize it. Bohemian Grove, you've got to explain what it is. And to get back to John Ronson's book, The Men Who Stare at Goats, this is the double standard that exists. When John Ronson, who happens to be on the left, reports on some of the very things that you've been talking about, not all of them, but some of them overlap. It's literature. It is documentary, book reading that gets made into movies. When you talk about it, it is written off as fantasy. Explain what Bohemian Grove is, the video that you shot either with Ronson or that you did it without him. But explain what it is so that people can appreciate the reality in which we live that might be more bizarre than their wildest dreams.
Sure. I'm not trying to attack Ronson, but he wrote Them, which I'm in, and a couple chapters of it is what happened at Bohemian Grove whenever he was there with me. And so to tell the story, because there's 2 stories, isn't there? I've got to talk about John Ronson. I'm covering Waco and what happened there and the trial of the Davidians and the fact that it came out that they sent the army in to kill them and burn it down. And this is in like 1998. And I'm there and 60 Minutes is there and I'm being interviewed. And John Ronson walks over and he says, "I make documentaries about extremists and I write books about them. And I'm going to sneak into a place called Bohemian Grove where they do all these rituals and everything. But the company I work for, World of Wonder, has a liability issue of me doing it. If I have insiders that are ready to help you get in and give you passcodes to get in, but you can't ever tell anybody this. And I'm going to sneak in there with you. And I need you to have the hidden camera because they give people like really control the local police there. They give people like 2-year jail sentences that have snuck in, CBS News and others. And I'm like, and I'm not even into the occult and New World Order at that point. I'm more like a mainline libertarian. And I'm like, sure, dude. And he goes, yeah, and I'll pay you, and I'll pay you first class, and I'll pay you $10,000 to sneak in there because he knew I'd snuck on a military base. They were doing some Delta Force stuff because they said black helicopters didn't exist. So I had military tell me where they were, and I went and showed some of the drills and caught some of the footage that it was really going on. Army Special Operations, the Night Stalkers out of Fort Campbell, Kentucky. So a year and a half pass, and he calls me. And he goes, all right, a couple months, July's coming up. Are you ready to fly to California? In Central California, Sonoma County, north of San Francisco, I guess it's Northern California. And are you ready to sneak into this place? And I go, sure. But back then, the internet wasn't very big. There was almost nothing about Bohemian Grove. World leaders put on red and black robes and green robes and white robes and get in front of a 45-foot owl, and they burn a child in effigy. I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to take my camera guy, Mike Hansen, with me, and I'm going to take my my girlfriend, my ex-wife now. And so we get to California. It's about a week before it happens, and I'm meeting with lawyers that are locals and actually are in Grove members, and they've decided they want this out. Later, I learned because Harry Shearer was, I guess, an attendee or something, and he wanted to make a movie, but they wanted it out first. So it was also they wouldn't get sued. So it was also World of Wonder wouldn't get sued. So then they could do the option to, because that's what Ronson does, is option movies. See, a bunch of his stuff's been made into movies. And I later learned this later. So I got to sign contracts on non-disclosure. I'll never talk about it and all this. Pretty soon they go, okay, get out here, go to the woods, get through, get to this place, know a passcode. Secret Service talks to me. I got John Ronson with me and this lawyer. They go, we're going to split off from you. They leave. I hide under one of the encampment cabins until it gets dark. I go out. Men come out and they do this kind of play with this big owl and do this mock human sacrifice. And I thought, this is stupid, till the 1,000 or so men at the little pond watching it were like, really getting off on it. But I should talk about Bohemian Grove instead of Ronson. The point is, then 5 years later, my phone starts ringing at like midnight. And John Ronson's on Coast to Coast AM saying, I don't know why Alex did that. I'm the one that snuck in. I don't know why he says he snuck in. I did it. I snuck in. I'm the one. So I guess when they didn't option the Harry Shearer movie, then he had to go, oh, I'm the Bohemian Grove guy. I mean, just bizarre behavior. So I call in. I know the show. I go on air and I go, John, I got a contract right here in this filing cabinet that says I'll never talk about this, and you asked me to sneak in there with you. I apologize, Alex. I apologize. You're right. You're right. You're right. You're right. Then he goes on C-SPAN, does the same damn thing. So I did my end of the deal. I snuck in. I got in the footage. I risked being arrested. I did what he wanted, and then he turned around and did that to me, and then he runs around basically saying I'm a white supremacist on the news. So that's why I'm pissed off at John Ronson. I shouldn't be talking about the guy, but that's the truth of Bohemian Grove.
Speaking of films, I was going to mention, a good side hobby you have is that I didn't know about is as film critic. You gave a fascinating film review of not the last Godzilla movie, but the one back in 2019 that was intriguing. Are there any particular films that stand out that were influential that you recommend to people that you like that in that category?
Well, I'm not a huge Godzilla guy, but it's funny I mentioned Godzilla earlier. Now you bring it up. I guess I did. Well, that whole Godzilla movie was about eugenics, and it was about Atlantis, and it was about secret technology, and it was about how the globalists want to depopulate the earth, and there's a secret group of rich people trying to trigger the end of human civilization to save the earth. So I was just, this is Hollywood with an allegory of actually what the globalists are doing and what they're actually talking about doing. But I'll tell you, eyes wide shut. Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah,
I got a chance to know over the years, Vivian Kubrick was his protege and his favorite daughter, and she helped kind of co-direct and do the music on some of his last films. She told me a lot of what I'd already been told by people involved in the film, that it went specifically to the elite, specifically to pedophilia, that he was never involved in it, but he learned about it, being at the top of Hollywood, and he was very, very much against it. And he was also, understood about demon possession and things. That's what The Shining is basically about, or kind of interdimensional possession or fold space. And that the 25 minutes that was cut out is just devastating. And that he was probably killed. He had final cut, and so he was able to put out what he wanted, but he died. He died before that could be a release. They did cut the 24 minutes or 25 minutes or whatever it was. So it's fascinating talking to Vivian Kubrick about that.
Well, and I think you look at Kubrick's films, he's often taking real life stories and trying to get them out in a cinematic narrative way. You're talking about Dr. Strangelove, and that, what you uncovered and talk about frequently about Operation Northwoods, which people should just read that to see what our joint.
Oh yeah, for folks that don't know, you're good at this, Barnes. Why don't you describe the 1964 film that is Dr. Strangelove versus 1961 Operation Northwoods, and L.L. Lemonster and Curtis LeMay, the real Joint Chiefs of Staff, coming to Kennedy and saying, we're going to stage an attack on our own bases to launch a preemptive nuclear war on the Soviet Union. And then you find out that Dr. Strangelove is a real movie about what almost happened.
Precisely. I mean, because Operation Northwoods is shocking because it's the top of our military infrastructure signing off on massive false flag staged events throughout, and whether or not people would have
to lead to a controlled nuclear war, they believe was one of them.
George C. Scott was not a made-up character. He was someone that Kubrick-connected people knew about. That was the mindset and the mentality of key people at the highest ranking of military. They thought they could, like when people...
And for folks that don't know, George C. Scott was L.L. Lemnitzer, and Curtis LeMay was Jack T. Ripper.
Exactly.
Well, you're all operating on the basis that people have seen Dr. Strangelove. Go watch it. It's an absolute classic. But Operation Northwoods, you have to explain what it is to anybody out there who may not know, because this would be one of those theories that you would never believe. And once you understand that it didn't just occur, it's reality. If you ever go back to not questioning the government, I would question your judgment. The only difference is how far do you go in that, and whether or not it creates a trauma whereby you question everything, including whether or not water is good for you. But Robert, Alex, whichever one of you, explain what Operation Northwoods was. And it's going to lead to my next question. The three biggest conspiracy theories that have turned out to be undeniable, demonstrable fact that would blow people's minds.
Well, Robert, you brought up Northwoods. You kind of set the table here, and then I'll just add a few points.
Sure. So, I mean, I was introduced to it by you. And I remember when I first heard it, thought, I can't believe that's fully the case. There must be some hyperbole, exaggeration, etc. But you understated it. I was reading the documents and I was like, holy cow. Because of who? This wasn't some low-level CIA analyst hanging out with Alan Dulles doing some sort of idea plot. This was the highest ranking of the U.S. military, all signing off, all demanding the president of the United States sign off to lie to the American people that they're going to false flag staged events, hijack airplanes, have boats sink, have terrorist events occur. They purportedly were not going to kill any Americans, but they were going to lead all Americans to believe that Americans had been killed and then use it to justify an invasion of Cuba, even if it meant another nuclear war, because they were actually gaming out how they could win another nuclear war. And so it's insane material. And the only thing that stopped it was John Kennedy. And then John Kennedy was dead about a year later.
So, and I've had this discussion with very intelligent people. And I said, this is all provable, demonstrable, known fact right now. And the response was, well, it didn't pass. And I was like, who signed off on this at the Department of Defense? But for the only person who signed off, as in didn't allow it to pass, and whether or not that had any role to play in what happened a year later, one will never know. But the timing is what the timing was. But who signed off on this at the highest levels?
It was the Joint Chief of Staff.
All right, well, since L.L. Lemnitzer was the chairman, Joint Chiefs of Staff, and Curtis LeMay, they greenlit it. They brought it as a action plan that they recommended right after the Cuban Missile Crisis. And so let me lay this out. And let me go ahead and just reveal this here. Usually modern intelligence operatives are just analysts, or they're, former Green Beret types, okay? And things used to be human intelligence and signals intelligence before the NSA and computers took over in the late 90s. So before, it was like, how big could the Soviet Union's human intelligence, HUMAT army be? How big could the U.S. human intelligence army be? But things went to digital and signals by the 90s. And so you didn't get half of it being on signals and then half of it on HUMAT. It's 90% on signals now. So usually people think, oh, the intelligence agencies know all this special stuff. They don't know anything nowadays. It's the corporations that have access to all the NSA spy grids, and big tech that have even more power than the NSA that are spying on people. And it's these corporate systems that are removing all the power to themselves, and the intelligence agencies have almost become vestigial. They're just a revolving door of big tech telecom executives that, make money when they're in the private sector, but with all their back doors and control into the NSA and into the other 16 agencies that they've transferred power to, and all the other agencies and systems. But globally, it's the telecoms themselves and the internet backbone that is the surveillance grid. The internet itself is a two-way system, just like TV used to watch TV because it's broadcast. Well, now TV watches you. And so with that preface, you go back to those days, though, you needed big events, big catalyzing events, and a lot of spycraft was theater. A lot of spycraft was deception. You go back to World War II, They would have a dead body, dress it up in a British uniform, and then have plans on it. They'd throw the dead bodies out in the ocean, hoping the Germans found the dead bodies, hoping the Germans found the plans, and actually out of however many dead bodies they threw out, they did find one dead body, and they won a major naval engagement, all because the Germans found that one dead body. So false flags simply go back to, thousands of years ago, but the British coined the term in the wars with the French, where they would run up their French flag, even though it was the British, and they would commit an atrocity and blame it on the French. And it was all, how much were your men willing to do? You'd pull over some normal vessel and kill everybody on board. The British were famous for it. The French did it some, but not as much as the British. And you would do a barbarous atrocity and blame it on the French. So that's where the term false flag comes from. And there's many, 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 many cases of this. And it's a dirty pool game that goes on. So I later learned from a former major ABC news producer a few years ago before he died. I'm not allowed to say his name because it's off record, but I did interview the guy. I'm not going to say who it is. That he'd been in the NSA, that there was no secret about that. He'd been a Nightline producer. And they knew about Northwoods. They knew it had been done. They knew that the attaché of L.L. Lemnitzer was Donald Rumsfeld, who'd become the youngest Secretary of Defense ever when Kennedy fired Lemnitzer. A few years later, Nixon gets in after LBJ, and you get Donald Rumsfeld, who just died last week, who later became Secretary of Defense yet again under George W. Bush. So in 2000. And so long story short, the good people in the NSA knew about those documents, knew who was inside the National Archives of the NSA, knew how to ask for something that wasn't completely classified so someone could slip that in there. And so this is WikiLeaks, proto WikiLeaks. This is early WikiLeaks type stuff.
It's paper leaks.
It's paper leaks. So they were so worried because they read Rebuilding America's Defenses that was put out April 2nd, 2000, if I remember correctly. And in Rebuilding America's Defenses, Pax Americana, Cheney says, we're going to stage a new Pearl Harbor event, and we're going to invade and take over the world in the grand chessboard. In the middle of the board is Afghanistan. And we're going to legitimize race-specific bioweapons. We're going to have a bioweapon war. We're going to take over the planet. And people got so scared by that, knowing that Cheney had worked for his boss, Rumsfeld, who'd worked for L.L. Lemnitzer, that they got scared and they leaked Operation Northwoods, which was a U.S. government greenlit plan to stage mass shootings at shopping malls and movie theaters, bomb U.S. military bases in the U.S., actually wound and kill people. Then they were going to have a plane with CIA families who they were going to say died, change their names, get on a plane that would take off in Miami with cameras on it, saying it was on a delegation to Cuba. They would blow the plane up, but really divert that plane, have another plane with the same tail number, blow up, and then have footage of the parts on the shore of Cuba as a pretext to then attack Cuba. They believe the Russians would then fire missiles at the U.S., and then they would already have B-52s in the air ready to nuke Russia and win that nuclear war. And that's what Dr. Strangelove, famous Stanley Kubrick film with Peter Sellers, his greatest work, in my opinion, is based on. And so then once you know that, they go, okay, we didn't get to do Operation Northwoods, so they then do Operation 9/11 later. And that's where, and it doesn't mean radical Muslims don't exist. It doesn't mean there weren't even real hijackers who thought they were part of an operation, but there was the stand down, the blowing up of Building 7, all the intelligence operatives, the airlift of evil, the flight school training being protected. And it all goes back to that pet project, that thesis that Donald Rumsfeld saw at the feet of L.L. Lemnitzer and Curtis LeMay.
And let's just put a big fat asterisk there so that nobody's misinformed or confused. This is your opinion, Alex, of contextualizing and putting into the historical context of what was actually Project Northwoods, and anybody can look it up. I heard about it on Joe Rogan, but I don't think it was through you, Alex, and it definitely wasn't through. This was a few years ago where I was like finally having my perspective, my horizons expanded. So this is where you get into your historical understanding and contextualizing in the current times to interpret the way you think things are going down presently based on the past. And you got in trouble for this. We don't need to get you back in trouble, although I don't know how much more trouble you can get in as to what happened once you started espousing publicly this view. But putting that on ice for a second, give us another good historical example of something that nobody would believe, but for the fact that it's documented truth now.
No one would believe, but it's documented proof now. I mean, the animal human cloning, which again, they kill them at the embryonic level. They're not like walking around from what we know. That's a big one. People wouldn't believe that if you read deeper into Tuskegee, they didn't just let black men spread syphilis over 40 years. Turns out the evidence was they were injecting them with it. They were doing it to poor whites in Appalachia. But once it came out, they're like, oh, it's just the blacks, using institutional racism to say that was okay, which proves that was definitely going on. Racism. How about reparations? How about paying those family reparations? I think they should, because those are, living victims and their families. And man, I tell you,
well, I brought up Gulf of
in the 1950s, they had a secret nuclear reactor already powering part of Southern California. A major saltwater reactor that blew up. They kept it secret till the 1990s, and it was bigger than Chernobyl. I mean, that's an example. There's just thousands and thousands of stories out there. I mean, here's one. The Finders. Ted Gunderson was the head FBI agent in Southern California. He was on the short list to replace J. Edgar Hoover. He apologized on my show. He helped run COINTELPRO. He arrested Martin Luther King. But he repented of it later. He was a good guy. He thought he was fighting communists. And he on my show 20 years ago, he died of bladder cancer like 8 years ago. Great guy, true American hero. He told me all this stuff about the Finders and a CIA base in DC and kidnapped children, and how good FBI agents found out about it in Florida with a bunch of kidnapped kids, and how they busted in, and there was all the child porn and satellite uplinks and videos of kids being killed. That all actually came out in DC newspapers, but then it all got shut down. And then 2 years ago, they actually declassified, the FBI did, several thousand pages on Twitter of the Finders, and stuff Ted Gunderson told me 25 years ago at dinner. He wouldn't even say this stuff on air, about whole towns taken over by Satanists and breeder farms of women breeding children for human sacrifice. And all of that got put out in that FBI data dump. And that's in the FBI data dump, and no one even cared or touched it. So if people think Nexium cult's big, or they think Jeffrey Epstein's big, that's the tip of the iceberg, folks. I mean, this stuff is just insane. And no one can believe it, but it's actually happening.
Now, you deal with every day, sort of, as we wrap up, in terms of, a lot of dark information, dark news in that context. How do you relax from it? Like, I mean, I remember July 4th when I was there. You did a great July 4th. I mean, old-fashioned Americana, fireworks on the front lawn. Wisely allowed me not to do any fireworks because then the house might have burnt down. But went out in the lake, had some fun, barbecue, the whole 9 yards. How otherwise do you relax and decompress from what is otherwise a very busy life dealing with a lot of tough subjects?
Alex, can I try to answer this one for you?
Well, that's exactly it. No, go ahead,
if
sir.
I'm taking a prediction, I'm guessing that you don't ever relax. You don't ever decompress. You always have the engine churning behind your head, whether you're sitting still or in action. And I do wonder if that's going to have a longer term impact on you. But am I projecting, or do you actually relax at some point?
Well, I can tell you, Barnes knows how to relax. And he knows how to suck down a cigar in like 3 minutes. It's like a cartoon. No, I mean, let me tell you how I like to relax. A big glass of whiskey after a big steak, after a big bowl of ice cream with a cigar and Robert Barnes. Go out on the lake, drive around, see the fireworks, come back, eat some more seafood, some more lobster tails, and sit out, on the front porch watching everybody at the lake shoot their fireworks off. And then, getting up at noon the next day, cooking a big omelet breakfast, and going back out on the boat and listening to Johnny Cash. I mean, that's pretty much, it never gets old. People act like these elitists are like into weird stuff and weird rituals. I never get sick of a steak. I never get sick of enchiladas. I never get sick of cold beer. I never get sick of, telling stories and having fun with cool people. And so that's basically it. But I mean, that's why I do drink too much. Sometimes I'll go 4 months not drinking, a month not drinking, because I lose weight when I do it. When I get home today, I'm going to have a big old, probably a glass of Jameson's on the rocks or whatever. It's a light whiskey, because that helps me turn off. But yeah, my dreams are about politics and history and things. And as soon as I get up at 5 a.m., It's just right because it's exciting. I love it. It's cool. It's interesting. And then I see it like a video game. When I'm getting attacked or lied about, well, sometimes what I'm being attacked for is real. And I'm not perfect, but they're not attacking me for good reasons. They're attacking me to shut me down. That helps me be reproved. Because if I was a prima donna and didn't admit that I've done all sorts of things, my God, I know so much more at 47 than I knew at 27. And I think if I'm lucky enough to be alive at 67, I'll be a much better person then. So it's a real honor to know folks like you and all these great people that are watching and listening, and it's one hell of an adventure. So, I hope that answers your question.
Good. It's good enough. And actually, I have two questions. I guess this might be the ultimate way to wind it up. Are you making any active efforts to try and get back on these social media platforms, or is it the idea dead in the water and you've moved on to being self-sustainable? And then I guess the second question, although I know some of the answer because I saw you on Malice, are you not concerned somewhat? And how do you live with that concern that you might feel for doing what you're doing? Both from the haters, from the lovers, and from the powers that be.
All right, okay. Last question is, am I concerned about what?
Concerned about your own, your well-being, your future, that of your family, in terms of the degree to the targeting that you can get from the lovers, the haters, and the powers that be.
Sure. And what was the last question?
What was the other one? Or are you making any active efforts to try to get back on these social media platforms? Is there any discussion in the work?
Okay, those are both great questions. Usually on my show, I'd have a piece of paper and they clean this off. So I'm good at writing stuff down. My brain jumps to the next thing. I'm sure like yours does. Who was it? Moucho Grouch, or how did you say his name?
Groucho Marx.
Who was Groucho Marx? I'm kind of tired now, but up since 5 a.m. Groucho Marx, not drunk yet, will be later. Groucho Marx said, I wouldn't be part of any club that would have me. Or was that somebody else said that? I think it was Groucho Marx. Is that I wouldn't be part of any club that would have me. I was never that good on Twitter. And just, all that stuff really didn't do that much. And Facebook and all that. They acted like it was this big, giant panacea, but all the real fans came to Infowars.com and my radio show. All the real people that really cared, that mattered, of every race, color, and creed, came to the actual show and the podcast itself and sought it out. So all the big pop audiences, they usually already saw some edited misrepresentation of who I was. So, that's a really good question about, do I want to get back on those platforms? Here's the thing. They're already announcing that they're going to censor everybody's text messages and emails. It's already begun. They've already censored the 45th president of the United States, and Facebook says his videos aren't allowed on their platform. That should scare and outrage everybody. And so they're so far past all of that. They decided the internet backfired on them. They thought it would be a surveillance system. Instead, it became an empowering system. So they're actively, in their own reports, their own white papers, speaking of those, here's the way to answer this. If you have time, I'll break it down. There was an article, I forget the exact name, but the article that links to it was titled, "Hold on to your tinfoil hat, Alex Jones. You are about to be taken off YouTube." And that linked to a Wall Street Journal article that was subscription and 35 pages long. And we have a subscription to Wall Street Journal. I read the damn thing. And it said, we're going to ban WikiLeaks so the left doesn't defend them. We're going to ban Alex Jones when the right doesn't defend him. Within 2 years, News Corp is already split from Disney. We're telling our stock portfolios, this is a really serious business article. This wasn't for the general public, subscription. They said, we're going to take Assange and WikiLeaks offline. He's already in jail. No one will stand up for him on the left. The left will fall. We're going to take Jones down. The right won't stand up. They will fall. And within 2 years, the entire internet will be like Netflix. Well, it didn't happen quite like they wanted, but it kind of did. And they said, we'll make paywalls work again. We will make people go back to us. And so this was big tech and big media and legacy media's response to the fact that all these, wild cowboys and folks, freebooters, were bigger than them. Was a huge demonization campaign, like artillery attacking us. And then when the artillery stopped, I knew, okay, now they're going to take us offline. And so I'd already stayed on terrestrial radio. I'd already gotten some TV stations. I'd already told listeners, you got to come to us. We already had our video streams years before. We already had our own podcasting. I knew it was coming because I could read a 35-page Wall Street Journal article about it. And son of a bitch, less than 8 months later, I was off all those platforms. And it was all done concerted effort in an admitted meeting of Tim Cook and Mark Zuckerberg and all of them together at midnight on a Sunday evening. And at 3:47 Central Time, I was taking off all that stuff showing that. So to me, if you got to be taken out, you want to be taken out in the first battle so people understand what's going on and so you can explain what's coming. Because if they'd have just taken out somebody else, they wouldn't have known what was going on. I told my dad, I remember my dad coming to the house. He's a smart guy. He said, man, you're really turning the heat up on air, because he works with us. I trust him. He does accounting. And he said, son, they're talking about censorship. They've been toying with you. They already banned you and then brought you back. And I said, yeah, they're just toying with me to build me up as the guy that's going to get banned so they can demonize me further and misrepresent. I said, I'm going to push them to ban me, not by exaggerating or lying, but by being as hardcore as ever, so I can be the first to be banned, so that people remember me going into this process, so I can explain the larger continuum and compendium. And he understood that. And that's one of those things where you get a hole in one, where you feel it, you know it, and you hit the ball and it goes, 1,000 yards into the hole and you can't believe it happened. I mean, we saw it, we understood it, we got ready for it. And like judo, or use a cheesy analogy that's not Godzilla, when Count Dooku shoots the bolts at Yoda and he just grabs it. He goes, oh, that's a trick you didn't know. And so I'm not that sophisticated. I'm not perfect, but that was something where we literally saw it, knew it, got ready for it. And like a judo move, instead of them attacking and they kicked my ass, I grabbed them and threw them through the wall. And now they've got a real issue to deal with. So Barnes knows about this. We can't say it on air. That's why they've got grand jury subpoenas out on me. That's why they're trying to indict me right now for criminal activities, because they couldn't beat me the other way. And that's what happens to patriots. I don't want to compare myself to Nelson Mandela because he's a communist, or to Mahatma Gandhi, who was a good guy. But I mean, if I got to go to prison for this, that's the way it is. I wonder how much bigger I'll get in prison. And it's not like I'm looking to go to prison, but I've committed to this. I'm going to do this, and I'm not going to back down. And I trust in the people. I've bet on humanity, and I've gone this far. I'm not going to stop now. And I'm just very thankful for your courage having me on, my friends. I really, or not my friends. I'll say you're my friends, you'll get in trouble. You horrible left-wing scum. How dare you have me on? I'm joking.
Good cover, Alex. Thank you.
Yes.
That might be a good way to end this. Everyone in the chat. Well, Alex, stick around. We'll say our proper goodbyes. But everyone in the chat, thank you.
Let's do questions if you want. I got more time unless you want to end it.
No,
you're probably sick of talking to me.
No, it'll get out of hand. I think we should leave this. That was a very good.
Let's take 5 minutes of questions.
Okay, 5 minutes of questions. 5 minutes. And let's see the first one to come up. That is a legit. I know I took a few screenshots of some other ones.
The one component that people had asked, including members of our locals board, Viva Barnes Locals.com, is that you saved thousands of people's lives by what you did on January 6th. There were members of our board that were there that day that didn't know what was going on, that saw a whole bunch of people walking in and thought, oh, okay, walk in, see what's happening, see the show. And because you got up on a car and pulled out a bullhorn and told everybody this was a setup, this was a trap, do not go inside, do not create problems. In fact, you were one of the key people telling people that all the way down. What when you got there, what allowed you to know right away this is something bad? This is meant to entrap people, ensnare people, in order to save a lot of people who otherwise would have gotten into trouble, but for what you did that day.
Well, I don't want to give myself credit, but I don't want to talk about my security guys, but they're all super awesome Army veterans. Like everybody says, elite Army guys. These guys have been members of the most elite Army teams there are. And they're all really smart, and they choose to work with me because they believe in what we're doing and the mission. They want to save the country. And I was like, let's wait here till Trump starts to come down to the speech. And my guys are on the radio and their phone, and they go, no, there's provocateurs attacking. We've got to run to that Capitol. We've got to stop this right now. You got to get there. You got to stop this. These guys never tell me what to do, but this time they're like, you got to get there now. You've got to stop this. And I've got like no Achilles and, everything else, but and I'm like, wait. And me and Owen start arguing and not putting down Owen. This is what happened. Owen's like, let's wait for Trump. And I'm like, yeah, let's wait for Trump. And the guy's like, we've got to get there. And I'm like, there's Capitol Police. They're not going to do anything. And they're like, we got to go now. And by the way, this is all on body cams. We uploaded the whole body cam. And so we run down there, and by then I've got a bullhorn, but it's like 200,000 people are already there, hundreds of thousands behind us. And I got a lot of people to turn back and not go in. I got up on top of pile of chairs because they had like pallets of those out for the inauguration coming up in a few weeks. And I went, and then my brain kicked in, and I go, wait, they have emergency PAs anywhere that are deafening at any major government building. And so I go to the police and I say, listen, you got to call your commanding officer. You got to get on your PA system and say, get out of the building. You're ordered to get out. These people don't know. I don't know what's happened, but I saw people going through the front doors. I said, we got to stop them. About 5 minutes later, a captain comes over and he goes, you can go up to the top and try to lead them off, but we're not going to let you on the PA. And I said, you need to get on the PA. And of course, the next day they're on the PAs. You're under martial law. No one can be around anywhere. So loud it made your ears bleed. And I'm not blaming them, but we now know Trump asked for National Guard. They told most of the police, go do crowd control somewhere else, do traffic control. They stood down, they opened it up, and key provocateur groups, agent provocateurs, went in and tricked people who then thought, because I saw it. People are like, screw you, Jones, we're with Q, minority of folks, but they believed that Q was ordering this, that Trump was ordering an attack when Trump was coming to speak over on the other side by the Supreme Court. So we were set up. I mean, Trump's events are always peaceful. My events are always peaceful. We'd had 2 big rallies in the months before. Nobody had even any problems other than a few Antifa stabbing some people at night. So we were blindsided. The police weren't involved. They were told to stand down and open up the doors and basically let folks in. So we were definitely set up and led into that. And I just remember being in the giant crowd trying to, because here's the ellipse. Here's the Washington Monument. Here's the ellipse. Here's the White House, Pennsylvania Avenue, and here's the Capitol. So it's a mile and a half away. The ellipse can hold 30, 40,000 people. It's got a fence around it. It's like a postage stamp. There's giant crowds, over 1 million people all over here. It took us an hour and a half to get through just into the ellipse, into the quote VIP entrance. This was a cluster, cluster F. We get in. My cell phone's barely working, but security's calling and stuff saying, hey, should we just leave now and get down there? Because it looks like there's some Antifa attacking the cops. They were attacking the police before Trump ever gave the speech. But the minute he said, peacefully go with me to the Capitol, was when men in black on earphones went, go, 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 go. And that's the first group that the footage just got released of these dozens of men in black that broke through the police and got in. And then there were people in black waving them in saying, Alex Jones says, get him. Trump says, get him. Attack. It's your Capitol. Take it. Take it. And they were the leftist operatives that tricked everybody. And so, I mean, we really witnessed history that day. And if I'd have just listened to my guys and gotten there 10 minutes earlier, I would have physically gone up there. And I'm not trying to be a hero. I wish, you talk about missing a lottery of like doing a good deed, stopping something bad. If I'd have just listened to my security guys, and if I just got down there earlier, we probably could have stopped it, and the country would be a different place today. But c'est la vie. That's
the flip side
that's just water under the bridge now.
If you'd been there 20 minutes later or didn't see it for what it is, there'd be another 10,000 people locked up in DC jails. So it was important and critical work to do that. But I'll transfer to Viva for community question.
No, you're right. Instead, 600 got in instead of 10,000 because the police opened the doors and were just waving them in.
Completely. It would have been the disaster that maybe some people in D.C. wanted to have happen to justify the power grab we're now witnessing in live time.
Lil Panda Cub asks the existential question, Alex, are you happy?
Well, you asked, am I happy and how do I feel about my family and am I worried? Of course I'm worried and I'm exhausted and I just, like you said, I power through it by having energy. And once you get really exhausted, there's no, something you've been up for 2 days, you got more energy when you don't. So I'm killing myself doing this and I hope my family's okay and I pray to God they are. And I'm just trying to be good and trusting in God and just moving forward at this point. And so there's no turning back now. There's no wishing things were different or whatever. I mean, I'm glad I did all this. I wish I had done it better. But hindsight, is 2020. That's ancient news now. I am better now going forward, and I make a lot less mistakes, but I still make them. And so I'm just very thankful to you and Michael Malice and Andrew Schultz and Joe Rogan and so many others that have had me on their shows so that people can hear what I actually have to say and not little cobbled together clips. And so I hope everybody subscribes to your channel. I hope they support you both because you're doing a great job. And I hope you come on my show whenever you want.
And I'll absolutely. And I'll end it on this. I want to say, like, I get some flack because people say I shouldn't give Alex Jones a platform. First of all, I'm not stupid. I know who has the bigger end of the fan club here. I'm not giving you a platform that you don't already have times 10. I like the discussion because this is on the internet. In theory, it should be out there forever. And if you say something outlandish, if you say something untenable, the fact checkers of the internet will fact check you. They'll put a highlight out and they'll say you were wrong here. And that's the discussion that I want to have. I don't like the fact that I feel fearful to even have these public discussions with controversial figures. This is the way public discourse should be had, because it actually quells the festering. I don't want to use inflammatory words. It quells discord as opposed to foments it. Whereas censoring you drives, certain things underground. It makes people think.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But listen, I do thank you, because here's the deal. I don't have a platform in all these places to actually say what I really believe, and they get to misrepresent what's going on. And then here's the problem. They're so discredited that they will say, I've said X, Y, and Z, and then people believe that. And I see people on Twitter and YouTube saying, Alex Jones says this, and so I believe it, and I didn't even say those things. So it's really weird. I mean, that's what's weird, is the system is so discredited that they lie about me and say I said horrible things, and then people adopt that just to be contrarian. So then they're misrepresenting me, stealing my identity, and then people are going, well, if CNN says the sky's blue, I say it's red. Then they repeat stuff they say I said I didn't say. It's weird, man. It's crazy.
And there's people. You say certain things. You've said them. People hear the clips. If people wanted to demonize anybody who spends all day on radio saying certain things, they can go after Howard Stern, which they've done. They can go after people and then try to blame all sorts of incidental or ancillary events on that person, what they said. It's when they do it for certain people, but don't do it for others. And I don't want to list examples, but we can think of the guy who shot up the baseball field. When they systematically do it for one person, but not for another, it is the David Mamet's every fear hides a wish. It's sort of the dog whistle, like, hey guys, let's make this worse as opposed to make this better. And then they ban you so that they can continue saying what they say. And it's not the way things are made better. It's the way things are made worse. And part of me fears that it's part of the design. But
and that's what's sick about this is the left follows Saul Alinsky's Marxist-Leninist rules for radicals. All these billionaires that are globalists, they're using leftist ideology to control people, but they're offshore and tax exempt. And the communists want to make it worse as fast as possible. Exactly. They want cultural decline. They want the social contract broken so they can, quote, build something better on the collapse. Well, I'm sorry. Western laissez-faire and wealth has its own decadence problems, but it's a lot better than North Korea or Cuba. And so replacing what we've got with globalist offshore, turning us into communist states that they control, is not a good system.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just wrap it up as we close out that Alex Jones is living proof that freedom still lives and America will survive.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. Everyone in the chat, thank you very much. Thank you for the support. Sorry I missed a lot of chats. Nature of the beast tonight, but I do appreciate it. I'll see you all soon Sunday night. Alex, Robert, stick around for our proper goodbyes. Everyone